The protagonist begins by saying it was a boring life. He was born into a regular family and lived regular days. Most days were dull, and he believed he would die without anything special ever happening. However, that wasn't the case. One of the protagonist's eyes glows as he says everything changed. On the screen is a blonde character, and he says he found a game called Heroes of Destiny, and that's how he became the owner of the world. However, now back in his apartment, he's really happy because he's finally alone. It's not that he likes or dislikes school. He turns on his PC and says it's just that when he's playing, that alone is enough to make him happy. In this place, he's the protagonist. He always preferred single-player games because you can play countless routes countless times. You can even use some hacks and surpass all the system's limits. It was like the entire world there existed solely for one player. However, with a sheepish expression, he says that's what he thought, but now it's time to start over. He turns on the live stream and someone asks if he's really streaming in the middle of the week. The whole chat starts mocking the guy, asking if he's some kind of bum who doesn't go to school and just stays on the PC, until someone named AGJ sends a donation of 10. Even though it wasn't much, he was happy since something is better than nothing. Then someone named DEA sends 1,000. Now he's confused. He grabs the monitor and everyone in the chat wants to know who this crazy person is. They're saying they're sure this guy will ask for a refund. But the person just asks him to check his email. When he opens the inbox, it's a message from the game's creator. He says he's a viewer who always watches the channel and is also a developer. He made a game some time ago that was so hard that nobody managed to finish it during the closed beta. And he wanted a guy to play this game to check its difficulty and approve whether he liked it or not. The protagonist got intrigued by this claim that no one could finish it. And what if he managed to complete it? Even a regular guy like him could become someone special. A window on the PC asks if he wants to install the game, and he immediately says yes. With that, a game called Heroes of Destiny begins. The message says the kingdom of Roke was destroyed by the kingdom of Japal in 294. He would be born as an insignificant soul in this place and become a hero to stop the resurrection of the demon king. And when he ascended to the god's throne, he'd be granted any wish he desired. Over an ocean, he says the graphics are much worse than he imagined. But considering it's a game developed by a single person, this is the limit of what can be done. He then writes his name, which would be master of the game. And with that, a welcome message to the continent of Ellen appears. He then finds himself lost in the middle of a forest. The game seemed pretty ordinary and weird because it didn't even have a tutorial, but he was fine with that. That's when he noticed something ahead. It was the village chief who says he's not a familiar face and asks what he wants there. However, the protagonist found it strange because there was no dialogue box. Seeing there was a box to type in, he wondered if the NPC could really understand what he was saying. He then tells the old man to hand over all the money or he'll kill everyone in the village. He waits anxiously to see how the man will respond, only for the old man to whack him on the head, asking what nonsense the boy is spouting. With that, his character falls to the ground and obviously, he dies. He was confused, trying to figure out if he could really talk to the characters. The game asks if he wants to try again, and he says of course he won't give up like that. This time, the old man asks the same question. But now he says he's in need of food and drink and asks for help. The old man, feeling sorry for him, leads him to the village and tells him to follow. He then enters the man's house, who gives him a mug, telling him to drink it to calm down first. The protagonist thanks him and drinks it, only to be poisoned and die in the chair. He then gets an idea and unplugs the internet cable from his PC. Without the internet, there'd be no way for the game's creator to control these NPCs. However, when he goes to talk to the old man, everything is bugged and strange. And in the next second, a message appears saying he was killed for speaking nonsense. At that moment, he realizes that disconnecting the internet isn't the secret to winning this. He then remembers that the name of the person who developed this game was DEA, but he has no idea if this is really a person or the name of the team behind it. It was already 1:30 a.m., and he decided to save since that was enough for one day. However, he was impressed that there was a game where you could talk to NPCs. It was almost like this world of heroes really existed. Now it made sense why no one managed to beat it during the beta test. He opens his eyes before going to sleep, thinking that he was really getting excited. From that day on, driven by the desire to be special, he was absorbed into that game. As he progressed, he lost track of time. He was completely immersed, and this continued for 10 years. Wow, the guy is motivated, huh? 10 years playing the same thing. In an office, someone calls for Oshiro-san. Turns out it's his coworker. She says she's already sent the files he asked for, and the guy thanks her. Some time passes, and she congratulates him for finishing everything. Our boy thanks her as well and helps while she stands there, a bit embarrassed, not knowing what to say. She then asks him why they don't go out for a little dinner, just the two of them, before heading home, and maybe have a second dinner after they get home. Her face clearly shows what she's hoping for. However, our Oshiro-san apologizes, saying he has to go home. The poor girl is left stunned. He says there's something much more important he has to do and waves goodbye. It seems she's disappointed again, having been rejected once more. She's been getting turned down for quite some time. I'll let it slide this time because today is the day he's finally finishing the game after 10 years, right? So, let's see. Apparently, the night turned into morning. He is congratulated for being the first human to enter the ranks of the gods, and for being registered in the Hall of Honor. Our guy is standing there, all happy that he finally managed to finish it. But his smile quickly changes expression. After so long, he managed to do what he always wanted, to become in some way special. But on the other hand, his life was more ordinary than ever. Wouldn't it have been much more extraordinary to be with his coworker? Huh, you idiot. At least in the game, he felt like he had lived something entirely different. He remembers the characters like the Black Prince, Gail Krakow, Cardinal Cesar Libero, and the Witch Celestina Urin. All the characters were full of charm and unique personalities. The reactions there were so lifelike that he felt those people existed somewhere else. But now, rubbing his eyes, he knows it's all over, until he hears a sound. Looking at the screen, he sees a message asking if he wants to start a new adventure. But this is a very honest message, warning him that if he presses yes, he'll be teleported to the continent of Ellen. And after selecting it, he wouldn't return until the game was completed. Oshiro wonders if there's some kind of secret stage. However, with his mouse, which looks more like a brick, he says he's eager to go through it all again. And now that he's come this far, he had no choice but to move forward. Of course, he's transported to the continent of Ellen. At least, unlike other protagonists, he was 100% warned. A strange voice welcomes the master of the game. Slowly, he opens his eyes, wondering why his chest hurts so much. He couldn't breathe properly and had no idea what room he was in, until someone next to him says he's finally awake. It's an old man with a mustache who says it's thanks to the high-tier potion he had reserved. The boy starts to open his eyes, and the man calls him Calyx-sama. But our confused protagonist asks who the mustachioed man is, leaving him unsure of what to say. As far as he remembers, the healer didn't mention this potion causing amnesia. However, the protagonist has a desolate look, clearly confused. The man then says he'll introduce himself again and states his name is Russell. The protagonist quickly notices the man isn't speaking Japanese, but he can understand everything he's saying. But the worst part is that he's still feeling the same chest pain since he woke up. Russell apologizes, saying it's his fault for rushing him. The chest pain was a side effect of the potion he gave him, but it would pass soon enough. He then says the boy will feel much better shortly, so he'll take his leave for now. With that, the door closes while our boy is left standing there confused. Some time passes and the candle goes out. He opens his eyes again and rises from the bed. Going to the mirror, it's just as he thought. His body feels entirely different, and it's obvious he's in a different body. A body he has no idea who it belongs to. He can remember the 30 years he lived, but he can't even figure out his name in this moment. Looking at himself in the mirror, he wonders who in this world this person is. That's when the famous system window appears. Player name, Calyx Shiken. A noble with no profession, completely battered and broken. Level 8 with a reputation of 3 stars and 14% approval. Additionally, he possesses the governing skills of finance, development, and military. What Calyx notices is that this screen looks very similar to the game system's interface. Now the whole being sent to the continent thing really made sense. He was in the main stage of the entire game, the famous continent of Ellen. He puts his hand on his chest and says he needs to calm down first. He then feels something strange. He beats his chest again and collapses on the floor in pain. This body of his was a wreck and he had no idea why, but at least it was clear this wasn't just a dream. First, he'd have to get used to being called Calyx Shiken. He goes to the bed and keeps repeating to himself over and over that he is this Calyx guy. As soon as he thinks about the window, it appears again. He's certain this must be the kind of thing only he can see. At this moment, he's 15 years old, and he decides now is the perfect time to gather information. After all, if he lets his guard down in this world, he'll be killed. He checks the system and sees he belongs to the county of Shiken. If the name of the place and his last name are the same, that means he's the direct heir of this land's ruling family. At least he was lucky in that regard. That's when someone knocks on the door, startling him as he wonders who it could be. He doesn't know how to react or what would be the normal way for Calyx to respond. He keeps repeating to himself that he is Calyx while saying nothing. Then we see that it's a girl outside. She brought a big steaming cup of tea, saying it's the boy's medicine. Realizing she's a maid, he decides to act with some dignity and tells her to come in. The girl steps into the room asking for permission. Calyx watches her closely as she walks in, kneels, and offers the medicine. What kind of medicine is this? She just walked in and I don't see any medicine there, huh? Now I see it. She's saying it's nice and warm and that he should give it a try. Our boy, who clearly needs a gym membership because he looks malnourished, asks who she is. But then he realizes that asking this will make it obvious he's not in his right mind. The girl looks confused and asks if he's feeling unwell. That's when a system window pops up in his head and he says no. The system shows that her name is Layla. She's 23 years old, has a reputation of -3, and a very low approval rating. However, he notices something odd in the system. She's affiliated with the Viscount of the Hoshiran territory. Considering they're in the county of Shiken, why is that listed in the system? Moreover, there's something even stranger. She has an unusually high combat capability, way too high for a simple maid. For someone who's played the game, he knows these are definitely not the stats of an ordinary servant. She's standing there staring at him, clearly waiting for him to drink. But looking at the tea, he's already made up his mind. No way he's drinking this thing from someone working for another house. Layla asks if he's alright and insists he drink the tea, but Calyx just tells her to leave it there and go. She starts smiling brightly, insisting he drink it right now. Calyx grabs her hand angrily, suspecting she's about to force him somehow. But as soon as it's in his hand, he fakes a cough and spills it to the side. As the cup falls, he thinks that's enough. Once all the liquid is spilled, he won't have to drink it. But then Layla, in a display of Spider-Man-level reflexes, catches the cup mid-air, ensuring not a drop is wasted. Seeing her pull off the classic Peter Parker move, he has no idea what to do. He takes the cup back slowly while wondering what kind of reflexes she has. It would be bad if their eyes met, as she might realize he did it on purpose. As she stands up, he lowers his head and looks away. She places the tea on the desk, saying his medicine is safe. Meanwhile, he's lying in bed, avoiding eye contact with her. He knows there's poison in there, and no way is he drinking it. He closes his eyes, thinking he has to do something about this situation. Just as he's about to pass out, she hugs him. She asks if he's okay, and Calyx wonders that he managed to dodge the situation for now. Looking at the system, he wants to know more about the house Layla belongs to. First, he sees in his status that he's the son of the Count's first wife, who's already passed away. He wonders if there might be some half-siblings from the second wife. He discovers there's one older than him at 16 years old. That's when he sees in the system that the new wife's name also ends with Hoshirin. He immediately connects the dots and realizes this woman must have sent Layla. If Calyx, the son of the first wife, dies, the woman's son will inherit the title of Count. Strangely, the lunatic is breaking out in a cold sweat while feeling excited. As always, the game Heroes of Destiny starts off hard. He then tells Layla he's feeling much better now and thanks her. But he asks how his stepmother is doing. Layla looks surprised and says the Countess is very upset about the boy trying to take his own life. She pleads with him never to do something like that again. That's when Calyx understands why this boy was bedridden and in such bad shape. Judging by the pain in his chest, this guy must have tried to end his own life. He says he won't do such things anymore, and Layla replies that the Countess will surely be happy to hear that. He thanks her again and asks her to leave. But her expression changes and she says he still hasn't taken his medicine. Now he's scared. It seems the damn girl won't leave until he drinks it. The problem is, she's there to kill him, and if he refuses, she might simply assassinate him outright. Even though he knows the game, at this moment he's just a fragile teenager. He could try yelling for help, but what if she cuts him down before anyone arrives? He would definitely die before that happens. She's already turning back to him, and he realizes he might not have a choice but to drink it. But then he asks himself the obvious question. Why is she poisoning him instead of just stabbing him and running away? If that's her plan, clearly she can't draw attention to herself. That poison is a way to make it look like he took his own life. It's the same poison that Farmer gave him 10 years ago. And Layla says that if he's having trouble drinking it, she can help. But there's something Calyx learned while playing this game. The worst will always happen, so it's best to be prepared. He's certain that even if he refuses, she'll force his mouth open and pour it in. The madman is blushing, saying this makes him really excited. Indeed, the game Heroes of Destiny never disappoints. Layla sits down and offers the tea once more. Suddenly, he grabs the poisoned tea and drinks it all. Layla simply watches as the effects of the poison finally kick in. As he expected, this was bound to happen. Now the question is, how will he get out of this crisis? There must be a person or an object to resolve this situation. That's when he remembers Russell mentioning having some high-tier potions in stock. He comes up with an idea and tells Layla to step outside and call for Russell. She asks why, and he humiliates her, asking if he really has to explain himself to a mere servant. The girl is shocked and quickly apologizes. When he shouts and orders her to leave and fetch Russell, she rushes out. Calyx knows that the potion Russell used earlier could be traded for a castle. Yet the man didn't hesitate to use it on him. At the very least, he seems like someone who isn't trying to kill him. As soon as Layla leaves the room, he gets up and tries to vomit. But no matter how hard he tries, nothing happens. The game wasn't going to make things that easy. One thing was clear. There was always a solution to every problem. He begins searching through all the drawers, desperately looking for an answer. But the system warns that his eyelids are growing heavy. As his consciousness fades, he continues searching, tossing books and rummaging for a solution, until his eyes grow heavier and he collapses to the floor. He wonders if he'll restart the game from the beginning or truly die for real. That's when he sees something. Right in the middle of the shelves, there's a potion. His expression changes upon spotting it. He starts crawling, finally grabbing the bottle. But upon opening it and taking a sniff, it's not what he expected. It reeks terribly like rotten milk. And that's exactly what it is: spoiled goat milk. He remembers that in the game, yogurt was the antidote for this poison. But can spoiled milk really be considered yogurt? The system once again warns him that his vision is fading. He knows that after the third alert, he'll have only 1 minute left. He brings the drink to his mouth, vowing to get even with Layla. And then he drinks it before losing consciousness again. Sometime later, he wakes up with Russell asking if he's alright. As Calyx opens his eyes, he has no idea if it's deja vu or if the game reset. But Russell doesn't understand what he's talking about and points out something more pressing. He wants to know why the room is such a mess and why the boy was sleeping on the floor when he came in. Calyx realizes the game didn't reset, he managed to survive. But that near-death experience is something he never wants to go through again. No matter what happens, he is determined to live. Now that this is settled, he needs to check the status of this man. He observes Russell and the system window appears. At the moment, Russell is the acting count of this land because the previous count died and hadn't chosen an heir yet. Even though it's a temporary position, it's something that could help him. The man seems like a strict military type, so Calyx believes he can be trusted. At least he was the one who saved him with that potion. Calyx calls out to Russell, saying he has something to share. They talk for a while, and it seems Calyx tells him everything about what's happening. But Russell says there's no evidence. Calyx learns that the potion Russell used was standard protocol in this family. It was just following normal orders. Russell explains that to him, all heirs of the Shikin family are equal, and he is obliged to serve both sides. Calyx then asks if Russell wants him to keep taking that medicine until he dies so everyone can claim the inheritance. But Russell questions if Calyx really lost his memory. You should know that the Shikin family is in serious financial trouble. In fact, it's a blessing that the Dalila family is helping them. He asks if the boy truly doesn't remember this or is just pretending. Calyx realizes Russell won't act without concrete proof. At least he figures the woman who poisoned him must believe he's dead. He tells Russell to let it go, saying it's fine. However, he has a simple request. Russell notices something different in the boy's demeanor. 4 hours later at Shikin Castle, someone moves across the rooftops. The figure stops atop one of the buildings, adjusting their face covering. The person observes the knights below. It appears to be Layla, who notices that security has been significantly increased. She glances at the wall, spots a tunnel, and in the next scene, she's inside the castle. Approaching a door, she sees there are no guards outside the room. She opens it, and inside, she sees a body covered with a sheet. Still, she's not entirely sure if Calyx is dead. At least she used a special poison, so he must have died painlessly. She takes a letter from her pocket and places it on the desk. She retrieves a seal from a drawer and stamps the letter. With everything in place, she only needs to leave safely. But suddenly, someone comes up behind her and places a sword to her neck. She instantly recognizes the voice, but the person says nothing, and she can only fear the blade slitting her throat. She pleads with him to wait and screams, claiming it's too late. Lord Calyx is already dead, and now the Shikin family can only belong to the Grumbine family. Of course, it's Russell standing behind her, observing everything. She falls silent for a moment. Then she asks if he shouldn't just be a simple noble serving the Shikin family. But that's when the boy stands up and says it all went exactly as he expected. The foolish girl is startled, isn't she? Our guy says that the slow death poison is quite stimulating, but he finds it interesting how one noble family is trying to poison another. He's certain that if this came to light, it would turn into a complete mess. Suddenly, Layla crouches and pulls her arm out of Russell's grip. But as soon as she tries to turn away, he grabs her arm again. With a swift turn and a strike to the ribs, she stumbles, revealing her thighs. Calyx knows that the difference between their skill levels is 3 stages. Clearly, she stands no chance. But Layla insists, saying he has no physical evidence, so no one will believe him. However, Calyx calmly replies that attempting to assassinate a noble is punishable by death, even if the assailant is a noble themselves. And his evidence is clearly right there on the desk. When it comes to witnesses, he points at her, saying there's one standing right in front of him. Suddenly, her expression changes and the poor girl begins to faint. She collapses to the floor, leaving him unsure of what just happened. Russell explains that she fainted. He places his hand over her body and observes a strange orb of mana. Our boy recognizes it as what's known as a mana hole. Russell explains that she likely doesn't know how to use any mana-breathing techniques. She's probably at the level of an elite soldier with good training. Russell, however, notices something odd. Calyx doesn't seem impressed by this information, suggesting he already knew about it. He recalls the boy mentioning he had a simple request. Now Russell wants to know how much this kid already knows. Calyx says that for now they need to imprison her because they have many favors to ask. Later, the devilish maid is tied to a chair. Her arm looks like it has a pokeball inside it as he tosses a potion at her. Our girl even wipes her face clean. When she wakes up, she finds herself tied to the chair. Calyx immediately mentions the slow death poison. Obviously, it kills within 3 to 6 hours. It's the ideal potion for anyone looking to end their own life. He speculates that if he died like that, everyone would think it was by his own choice. He grabs her face and asks why she did it. She feigns ignorance, pretending not to understand what he's talking about. But Calyx says he's sure she was afraid of dying, which is why she acted the way she did. This means she doesn't have enough loyalty to lay down her life for Lady Stella. But the girl remains silent. He tells Russell to make her talk. Russell pries her mouth open and sees something in Calyx's hand, wondering what it is. But Calyx just tosses it into her mouth and she immediately smells something strange. It's probably that same goat milk again, and he orders Russell to make her drink it. She screams in the chair, trying to break free, but it's no use. When Russell lets go, she screams, asking what they made her drink. Calyx casually says it was just a little bit of poison. Then he asks if she's familiar with something called Seta's puppet. Terrified, she claims it's impossible, saying there's no way a noble from a family like his could get such a thing. But Calyx says that with enough money, you can do whatever you want. To prove it, he mentions that the primary ingredient for the recipe is white radish. Russell seems impressed while Calyx just waits for her reaction. Layla insists she doesn't believe him, but the protagonist is certain she's scared out of her mind. She then says she'll leave for now, report to her master, and say the assassination was a success. She questions whether he really thinks she'll follow his orders, but Calyx simply asks if she's ready to die. Acid's puppet poison has over 3,000 different antidotes depending on the formula, and the correct one for what she drank is stored in his mind. So if she doesn't want to die a stupid death, she better listen to him. The girl is breathing heavily, clearly shaken, but he demands her answer. After hesitating for a moment, she shouts that it's fine and asks to be untied. But Calyx remarks that she seems awfully angry at the person who's saving her life. She's trembling, almost crying in the chair, begging to be released. Russell finds it strange that she suddenly decided to comply. And there she is, pleading for mercy. Calyx knows it's just the spoiled goat milk wreaking havoc in her stomach. She pleads with Russell to untie her. But Russell hesitates, questioning whether Calyx has forgotten that she tried to kill him. The boy responds that she's a very valuable witness and they'll need to treat her with a bit of dignity. Russell has no idea what he's talking about. Meanwhile, she keeps begging to be released. She's on the verge of tears, seemingly about to explode, pleading for freedom. Time passes. She eventually announces that she's leaving to report that the assassination was successful. She leaves the room. Now Calyx knows he'll have to deal with someone else who can control all the knights. That person is standing right beside him. Russell then demands to know how Calyx obtained all this knowledge. The fool is about to say he learned everything from books but realizes Russell wouldn't believe that. Russell warns him that explaining such things through a book would be akin to signing a death sentence. Now Calyx is unsure what to say. No one will believe him if he claims he's from another world. He then asks Russell if he remembers the dagger he plunged into his own chest. Russell says he does, but wants to know why he's bringing it up. Our boy explains that the dagger is actually an heirloom passed down from his mother. She claimed it possessed mysterious powers, and it seems those powers have now awakened within him. Russell doesn't look convinced, but Calyx says he never imagined the secret to gaining such knowledge was to strike his own heart. The butler insists that if it were such a rare item, everyone would know about it. Calyx thinks for a moment and asks if he's heard of the dagger of Claire. Apparently Russell has, as he asks if the previous lady's dagger really was that artifact. If it was indeed that treasure, it could explain Calyx's vast knowledge. However, Russell says there's one issue. He wants to know if anyone else knows about this. Calyx assures him that no one does. He's the first. He then asks Russell what he thought about Layla's story, specifically the idea that all of Count Claire's movements, his father's movements, had been leaked. A knight like his father, who was on the verge of advancing in rank, shouldn't have died to a mere monster attack. It's ridiculous to believe such a story. Russell immediately realizes Calyx is seeking his help. But in the political games of succession, Russell has no intention of getting involved. However, if the Count's death truly was premeditated, that changes everything. Yet gripping his sword, Russell debates internally. As a soldier, he doesn't want to get entangled in politics. This principle has guided him for 50 years. Just as he's about to express this to Calyx, the boy suddenly shouts, demanding to know why his father had to die. All he wants is to understand why his father was murdered and who was behind it. Obviously, so he can start planning his revenge. He asked Russell if he isn't curious too. Whoever it was, they already know it was someone who stood to benefit from his death. But they can't give up just because the situation seems difficult. He pauses for a moment and asks if it's truly right for a knight to serve a family that orchestrated an assassination. Russell freezes for a moment. Then he kneels and swears loyalty to Calyx. Our boy is thrilled but hears Russell add one caveat. By doing this, he is abandoning the beliefs he held for 50 years. Never to involve himself in politics. But Calyx is just happy to gain someone so powerful as an ally, especially one invested in the vengeance he seeks. He tells Russell to rise, saying he doesn't need to swear loyalty to someone who doesn't even hold a title. But Russell reassures him, saying he'll ensure the boy grows strong. Our guy quickly changes the subject, not wanting this conversation to lead to Russell suggesting training him. He then says that now that they know about the Countess poisoning attempt, everything is falling into place. They're only at the beginning of their revenge. Russell asks how he can assist. Calyx is about to reply when the scene changes. A group of people is gathered around an enormous table. A blonde woman with a fan comments that everyone is finally present. Some people whisper, questioning why the Countess is sitting on the throne. The Countess speaks up, saying that some of them must already know what happened yesterday with Prince Calyx. He attempted to end his life using a poison known as slow death. One of the older men says it's the typical choice for those looking to take their own life, and if he consumed it, death was inevitable. Everyone is aware that with Calyx's death, the faction he represented has become irrelevant. The Countess is overjoyed by Calyx's apparent demise. Now it's certain that Grumbine will assume the Count's seat. This is exactly the question everyone in the room is asking. Some suggest that the Countess take charge temporarily. Meanwhile, in the next room, a boy is getting ready, remarking how things are becoming quite interesting. He calls out to Russell, who declares he'll follow him to the end. Our boy is fully armored, ready for battle. It seems Grumbine is just some chubby kid, likely the son of that scheming woman. Everyone is smiling until someone kicks the door open. Who steps in? Everyone? By their shocked faces, you already know. It's Calyx, with Russell right behind him. The Countess is utterly confused, unable to comprehend why he's alive. Everyone in the room starts whispering the same question. Calyx marches up to the Countess and calls her by name. He informs her that the throne she's sitting on does not belong to her. She tries to play it cool, commenting on how energetic he looks and asking how he's feeling. He smiles, saying he drank the poison but luckily survived. Then he warns her that she was far too hasty in her plans. She tells him to calm down and not make baseless accusations. Even though he never acknowledged her as his mother, calling her an assassin is unforgivable. She screams, declaring that in the Grand Hall, one must take responsibility for their words. But Calyx responds, saying it's impressive how she remains so dishonest even after being exposed. The Duchess, clueless about what he's planning, asks what he's talking about. Calyx simply says that for now, this is the next step. Suddenly, he claps his hands and someone enters the room. Layla walks in and he announces that the witness has something to say. The others in the room have no idea who this woman is, while the Duchess immediately realizes that if it's who she thinks it is, she's in deep trouble. Layla kneels and Calyx asks her to state her name. The girl slowly opens her eyes, glances at Grumbine, and introduces herself as Layla. Now the Duchess is panicking, unsure why this girl is here. Layla introduces herself as a shadow operative from the Hoshiran family's Special Operations Unit. Calyx commands her to explain. She explains that members of this unit are orphans trained in the Gorda fields. The children who survived were selected and sent to other locations with false identities. He asks if she was working undercover at his castle. She says yes, pretending to be a maid employed by Lady Stella. Calyx then asks if she knew her true mission. Layla admits that she did. The Duchess yells, claiming that all of this is a nonsensical conspiracy. Others in the room protest, saying Layla had worked at the castle for 5 years. How could she possibly be a spy? The room erupts with accusations that the Hoshiran family is scheming something. However, others question why Layla would confess to such a thing without reason. The treasurer next to the Duchess starts to panic. He shouts at Russell, demanding to know why he's staying silent. Does he really believe the words of a maid like her? Russell calmly responds that she isn't a maid but a criminal caught in the act. She was forced to admit that she was a spy working for the Hoshiran family. Whether this is a conspiracy or not, it must be judged after hearing her testimony. The treasurer has no good response. Another noble interrupts, telling the treasurer to stop interfering and let the woman speak. The treasurer, angered, asks what he just said, but someone else shouts for everyone to be quiet. The room falls silent, and the Duchess's anger is palpable. Someone asks Layla what her mission was while working for the Hoshiran family. She states it was to gather information. Calyx asks what kind of information. She explains that she was tasked with tracking all income and expenses of the territory, noting all travel dates and destinations of the former count, and monitoring the movements of political allies and vassals. Calyx then steps forward and asks her what her most recent mission was. She reveals that her orders were to poison Prince Calyx with the slow death venom. After his death, she was to place a forged suicide note in his room to make it appear he had taken his own life. Calyx, cold and calculated, asks her what the outcome of her mission was. She admits that she successfully poisoned him but was caught by Count Russell when she entered to plant the note. The Duchess screams, demanding that the woman be arrested. Guards rush to seize Layla, who tries to resist, shouting that there's no evidence to back these claims. Calyx, looking as composed as ever, calls out to Russell. Russell nods and presents the forged suicide note. He explains that he was in Calyx's room when Layla entered to plant the letter. Then he reveals a memory of the Earth Scroll. He reminds everyone that this magic is capable of revealing malicious intentions. With this scroll, they could uncover who ordered Layla to carry out this act. The treasurer realizes that if this evidence is revealed, it's over for all of them. They have to stop it, even if it meant silencing everyone in the room. Calyx, noticing the treasurer's tension, smirks, already knowing he tries something drastic. He stretches his arms and calls for the knights to enter. The room fills with the sound of footsteps as an army of knights marches in, positioning themselves behind each noble. Now there was no way to suppress the truth. The treasurer, terrified, demands to know from Russell what this means. Russell explains that after reviewing the scroll's contents, the results were shocking. To prevent disorder and chaos, summoning the knights was the only option. The nobles protest, claiming it's wrong to bring soldiers into the sacred Great Hall. Meanwhile, Grumbine, the chubby-haired parent, sits in stunned silence, looking like a fool. The Duchess, realizing the knight's presence means the evidence is irrefutable, knows she's trapped. There's nothing she can do now. Calyx then asks Russell what the punishment is for a noble who attempts to kill a member of their own family. Russell replies that it's death by hanging. The Duchess, in desperation, grabs her piggish son and declares he had nothing to do with this. She turns to Calyx, pleading, saying that while they aren't related by blood, she is still his mother. She begs him to believe her, but Calyx only glances at Layla. With a sly smile, he asks her if this is true. Layla, trembling, reveals that when she received her orders from the Countess, Prince Grumbine was present. Calyx smiles and the Duchess falls into despair, screaming and crying, claiming it's all a lie. But is it a lie? Our boy, unfazed, announces that he doesn't care if it's a lie. He's determined to take them both down. After all, she's the one who tried to assassinate him in the first place, making them the true cowards. Looking at her sobbing on the floor, he declares that the fox hunt has now reached its climax. As the Duchess sits there, her jaw practically glued to the table in shock, someone suddenly slams their hand on the table and calls for Calyx. Calyx looks over. It's the king of McDonald's himself, Grumbine. The Duchess screams for her son, and Calyx turns just in time to see the boy beside him. But instead of defending himself, Grumbine kneels, bowing deeply at Calyx. The entire room is stunned as Grumbine stares at the floor like he's searching for ants. The other nobles urge him to stand, demanding to know what's going on. But Grumbine calls out to Calyx, saying he'll accept any punishment as long as his mother is spared. The Duchess, confused and panicking, begins screaming at Grumbine to return to his seat. The nobles murmur that things have gone too far, but it's clear Grumbine has crossed a line to save his mother. Calyx immediately realizes that if he orders both of them killed now, he'll be seen as the villain. He wonders if this has been Grumbine's plan all along. Despite his anger, he places a hand on Grumbine's shoulder and says it's fine. If he truly cares so much for his mother, Calyx has no choice. Grumbine looks up, surprised and hopeful, asking what he means. Calyx states that if Grumbine confesses his involvement, he'll request a reduced punishment for his mother, but he warns him to think carefully about what that means. Grumbine hesitates, unsure of what to say, while the Duchess screams at him not to do anything unnecessary. She orders Calyx to stop threatening her eldest son, but other nobles interject, blaming her for plotting to kill Calyx in the first place. Meanwhile, Grumbine appears lost, unable to understand how everything spiraled so terribly out of control. Calyx, growing tired of the chaos, calls for Russell and instructs him to arrest them both. The knights in the corner step forward, surrounding the Duchess. She orders them to stop, questioning if they know who she is. But from the side, Grumbine can only watch as his mother is gagged. He clenches his fists. Calyx turns to him and asks if he'll take responsibility for the crime of attempting to poison him. Despite his fear, Grumbine, showing unexpected courage, admits to it. Calyx had anticipated this. After all, it was the only move Grumbine had left. Impressed by the boy's calculations, Calyx declares that since he confessed before the evidence was fully revealed, the family's name will remain untarnished. However, as part of his sentence, Grumbine must seal his mana permanently to prove he won't cause further harm. Grumbine hadn't expected this. In this kingdom, society is divided into classes: nobles, knights, commoners, and slaves. The only way to become a knight is by using mana to strengthen the body. Sealing one's mana is akin to a social death sentence for a noble. Grumbine turns desperately toward his mother, who lies on the floor, confused about what he'll do. If he refuses to seal his mana, his mother will be exposed and hanged, a fate he cannot accept. The Duchess, unable to speak through her gag, shakes her head violently, knowing this punishment is worse than death for a noble. Taking a deep breath, Grumbine stands and agrees to the terms. Russell assures him it will be done. He hands Grumbine a scroll. Grumbine bites into it, pressing his hand against his chest. A golden circle forms over his stomach as mana begins to accumulate and slowly fades. The Duchess writhes on the floor, desperate for him to stop, knowing not even a Grandmaster could undo this. Grumbine tears the scroll away from his chest as Calyx watches in silence. The mana continues to dwindle until it vanishes completely. Everyone in the room realizes his mana has been sealed. The Duchess, sobbing uncontrollably, looks defeated, while Grumbine appears content. At least he managed to save his mother. But she lies on the floor, lamenting that it's all over, disappointed in her son's naivety and innocence despite being her biological child. Grumbine turns to his mother, trying to comfort her, saying he's always dreamed of becoming an artist. But the Duchess, biting down on her gag, screams Calyx's name in fury. Breaking free of her restraints, she curses Calyx and vows to bring ruin to his family for generations. Calyx, calm and composed, knows she's powerless now. Her strength will likely amount to no more than Layla's. Grumbine kneels by his mother, gently asking if she's okay. Calyx, however, feels a pang of guilt for ruining the future of someone so young. But he reminds himself that it's just a game. There's no room for sympathy. Russell, observing him, seems confused as Calyx steels himself for the next step. Now that they've come this far, there's no turning back. Calyx orders Russell to proceed with the remaining matters. It's announced that Lady Stella and Prince Grumbine will be confined to an annex, forbidden from any outside contact. The mother and son are escorted out through the door, leaving Calyx watching intently. He then approaches the treasurer, accusing him of leaking vital documents. As a result, the treasurer is stripped of his position, imprisoned, and placed under investigation. The old treasurer tries to make excuses, claiming his situation is different. He curses at one of the soldiers, who doesn't appreciate it, and lands a solid punch to his gut. With that, the bald man is dragged away. Calyx feels a bit awkward about causing all this chaos, but at least things seem to be working in his favor. The remaining people in the room tremble with fear, terrified they might be punished next. Observing Calyx, they begin to realize something. Russell's support means that all the knights are aligned with this prince. In a way, the succession dispute has already ended. Russell's loyalty to Calyx is a direct warning to everyone in the room. Calyx calls for the head of security, who nervously approaches. Russell steps in, declaring that the man is suspended from all his duties. The security chief has no choice but to accept, while the others in the room grow even more anxious, fearing they might be next. Suddenly, a man seated in the corner apologizes. He admits to failing his duties and asks to be dismissed. Calyx, however, knows that this man, Garrett, is one of Russell's trusted allies. Russell immediately denies the resignation, stating firmly that it won't be accepted. "Those who want to work don't get to, and those who don't want to will have to," Russell remarks sarcastically. The room prepares a list of all the officials involved in the incident. Garrett is tasked with overseeing their removal. As this unfolds, Calix walks over to Garrett. He informs him that only 4 individuals from the finance department will be exempt from investigation. Clearly, they'll need a lot of new personnel. Garrett advises leniency toward those with minor infractions, warning that removing too many officials at once could disrupt operations. Calix counters, questioning if avoiding investigations for the sake of operations is really a good idea. He argues that granting forgiveness won't be seen as leniency. It will be perceived as weakness. Garrett insists that many of the officials were merely aligned with the wrong side, but Calix interrupts, stating that his decision has already been made. Seeing that the prince won't budge, Garrett concedes. And he can't help but wonder how this once weak boy has become so resolute. The room is aware of Russell's strength and Garrett's intellect. Now both stand by Calix's side, solidifying his position. Our boy smiles, knowing the county is nearly within his grasp. Suddenly, a blue light flashes. He opens the system and declares it's time to use more of his talents. As the system interface appears, he begins analyzing everyone in the room. The glint in his eyes and his crooked smile give him the look of a madman. Calix identifies everyone with ties to opposing factions or ambiguous loyalties. Those individuals are marked for removal. Even the useless ones won't escape his scrutiny. Only those who survive his loyalty test will remain in his future plans. Like the rest of the nobles, I'm sitting here wondering why this kid has such a creepy grin. Some of the others are trembling, knowing that if Calix takes a dislike to them, they're doomed. Desperate, they rush forward, showering him with praise, calling him an incredible leader and begging to speak with him. Calix tells them to calm down, saying they have plenty of free time to discuss things later. Russell watches from the sidelines, still unsure how things turned out like this. Time passes, and we return to the castle. After a day filled with political maneuvers, Calix collapses onto his bed. He's exhausted. He reflects on his past life, where he was average in studies, appearance, and just about everything else. Nothing in his life was terrible, but nothing was particularly great either. That all began to change when he discovered Heroes of Destiny. He wondered if completing something no one else could would finally make him special. He recalls the moment he finished the game and the message declaring him the first human to acquire the Seed of the Gods. At that moment, he wiped his eyes and wished to be reborn in the continent of Ellen. It was the only way he could continue to feel extraordinary. Now sitting on his bed, he remembers that wish and the game's narrative about being born as an insignificant soul. The story said he would need to survive turbulent times and become a hero to ascend the throne. He suddenly realizes what's happened. When he completed the game, his wish was granted. But perhaps the deity misunderstood what he truly wanted. Still, it doesn't matter now. There's no turning back. Calix wonders if completing this game once more will grant him another wish. He began drifting off to sleep, vowing to conquer this world again. The next morning, he wakes up, refreshed and ready for a new day. He ponders where to begin. He remembers certain territories perfectly from the game, but has no idea what Shiken is really like in this world. Calix decides he needs to check the map to figure out exactly where Shiken is located. The system even provides him with a detailed map. What a beauty. A message pops up, notifying him that he's already conquered the entire continent of Ellen. Since he finished the game once, he now has access to all the map markers. He's ecstatic, realizing this is essentially a treasure map, showing the locations of ruins, dungeons, and hidden secrets. This was one of the bonuses nobody knew existed, as no one else had completed the game. The map even includes information he wasn't aware of himself. With this resource, navigating the world becomes much easier. Then he pauses, wondering what year it is. He checks the imperial calendar and sees it's the year 289. The game Heroes of Destiny begins in 294. This revelation helps him understand Shiken's situation. He inherited a piece of land that in 5 years would somehow vanish. He recalls Russell mentioning the dire state of the finances, and now it makes sense. They are on the brink of collapse. Suddenly, a financial status window appears in front of him. Calix glances over the details and immediately yells that it's unbelievable. Looking at the current state of affairs, he wonders if the best option is to steal all the money and flee. But he quickly dismisses that idea, realizing land is far more valuable than wealth. It can only be inherited. His first step is to review all financial records. He notices that farm collections aren't significantly lower than in other territories. Defense expenditures haven't risen much either. Time passes as he pores over the documents. A few hours later, he slams the papers onto the table, exclaiming that he's exhausted. Analyzing 10 years of territorial finances is too much for him. However, he identifies a major problem. The trade route with the Medrosa Desert has been severed. Apparently, another nation established a more lucrative trade route, drawing merchants away. What puzzles him is how they managed to fund such a large-scale project. On top of that, the annual debts are growing faster than their yearly income. Statistics alone aren't enough to solve this mystery. He needs more information. Frustrated, he rubs his head until an idea sparks. He remembers the old man from the meeting, the treasurer Gidris, who was caught embezzling funds. At the moment, Gidris is locked up in the dungeons. The scene shifts to Calix descending into the cells. A guard station at the entrance asks what Prince Calix is doing there. Calix requests to see Gidris, pinching his nose at the overwhelming stench of the place. As they walk, the guard remarks that he never imagined the prince would visit such a place. Calix remembers this guard from the meeting, a type who submits easily to power. He calls out to the guard, who nervously responds. Calix, knowing the guard lacks authority, asks if innocent people should have their names cleared. The guard agrees enthusiastically, saying the prince is absolutely correct. Calix continues, suggesting that criminals who don't deserve freedom should also be reinvestigated. The guard salutes, claiming he understands perfectly. Though Calix doesn't fully grasp why this man abandoned his previous loyalty to work with him, he decides to use him for now. He reminds the guard not to address him as Lord just yet, as he hasn't officially taken the title. The guard apologizes, calling him Prince again. Feeling slightly awkward for enforcing formalities so hard, Calix simply orders the guard to lead him to Gidris. Moments later, they arrive at Gidris' cell. Inside, Gadris complains about the disgusting food, declaring that he'll be out soon anyway. Suddenly, Calix appears, asking how exactly Gidris plans to escape. What incredible plan does he have up his sleeve? Gidris turns, smiling confidently, and says he's been waiting for the prince. He claims Calix owes him a favor. Confused, Calix retorts that he owes Gidris nothing. The only thing he'll ensure is that the rope for his hanging is strong enough not to snap. But Gidris, far from stupid, argues that while he may be imprisoned now, he's the only person with 20 years of experience managing Shikin's finances. If the prince is visiting him, it must be for that reason. Calix reminds him that he lost his financial position, but Gidris counters by asking if he's curious about the root of Shikin's massive debt. Calix's anger flares as the smug treasurer seems oblivious to his situation. Meanwhile, Gidris grins arrogantly. Suddenly, Calix calls for the guard and asks if there's a torture expert on hand. The guard hesitates but confirms they have one. Calix orders him to fetch the expert. When the guard hesitates again, Calix yells, asking if it looks like he's joking. Terrified, the guard scrambles to comply, leaving a cloud of dust behind him. Fuming, Calix decides Gidris needs to understand how things are handled in this territory. Gidris quickly realizes that if a torture expert gets involved, he's in real trouble. Calix remarks that someone like Gidris probably doesn't have much tolerance for pain. Calix smirks and wishes Gidris good luck. If your resilience impresses me, he says, maybe I'll let you hang slowly instead of all at once. Gidris is taken aback. This kid is far more serious than he expected. He immediately begins begging for mercy, pleading that he has valuable information that could bring great profit to the territory. Calix, unimpressed, tells him to start talking. Gidris begins explaining how the debts of Shikin came to be. All the major debts of this territory are tied to a merchant named Gerard Merces, Gidris says. Apparently, Gerard manages a secret vault for the Hoshurin family. The Hoshurins use Gerard to avoid paying royal taxes on mining operations. But Calix interrupts, asking why not just report Gerard to the royal family and shift the debt onto him? Or perhaps sell the debt rights before arresting him. Gidris seems stunned, clearly impressed by the suggestion. That's an incredible plan, he stammers, one I hadn't considered. Before Gidris can elaborate, the guard suddenly returns, announcing that he's brought the territory's best torture expert. Calix lights up with excitement, while Gidris begins pleading more desperately for mercy. I know where Gerard's secret vault is, he blurts out. This catches Calix's attention for a moment, but before he can react, the torturer shoves Gidris to the ground, telling him to keep quiet. Gidris continues to insist, shouting that he's telling the truth. He's worked in Shikin for so long that he's the only one who knows the vault's location. Calix steps on Gidris' face with his boot, commanding him to speak. Where exactly is this secret vault? Gidris hesitates, clearly trying to stall. Calix growls, start talking. The torturer cracks his knuckles, saying breaking fingers one by one is always a good start. Panicked, Gidris admits that he once tried to rob the vault but failed. Calix immediately deduces that Gidris didn't act alone. The old man confirms this, explaining that he paid some bandits in gold bars to help him. How much did you pay? Calix demands. The 300. Calix interrupts, incredulous. No, 3,000, Gidris finishes weakly. Hearing this, Calix bursts into laughter, the sound echoing ominously through the dungeon. The guard outside the cell gulps nervously. He knows that when the prince reacts this way, it's never good. Calix composes himself, his voice icy. 3,000 gold? That's the annual revenue of this territory. Where did you get that kind of money? He accuses Gidris of embezzling funds from Shikin's treasury. Gidris bows his head to the ground, confessing that he had no choice. The opportunity was too tempting, he says. If it weren't for that cursed magic crystal orb, I would have succeeded. Calix narrows his eyes. What's this about a magic crystal orb? Gidris explains that the orb was used to access the vault. He adds that duplicating the orb cost him 2,500 gold. Calix begins piecing things together. You were scammed, he says flatly. The bandits and Gerard Merces were likely working together. Gidris shakes his head, insisting it's impossible. I saw it with my own eyes. Gerard used the orb to open the vault door. Calix orders Gidris to reveal the vault's location. It's in the highlands of Gorda, Gidris says. Calyx opens his map, and while Gidris admits he was blindfolded during his attempt, he's confident the vault is in that region. The prince pauses, deep in thought. Everyone around him wonders why he's just standing there, staring at nothing. Focusing on the map, Calyx deduces a potential area to investigate. He realizes he needs someone familiar with the highlands of Gorda. Remembering Layla's comment that her orphan squad was trained in Gorda, he formulates a plan. Calling for the guard, he announces they're leaving. Gidris, desperate, shouts after him, demanding to know where he's going. But Calyx leaves without answering while the guard slams the cell door shut. Walking away, Calyx can't help but think about the 3,000 gold Gidris stole, and how this guard likely pocketed his share. His fury grows as he contemplates it further. He suddenly stops and calls for Shu, the guard. Startled, Shu nervously asks what he needs. Calyx casually mentions the 3,000 gold Gidris stole, asking if Shu knew about it. Shu, feigning ignorance, vehemently denies any knowledge. Calyx smirks and starts walking away. I overheard something interesting from Gidris while you were out, he says cryptically. I'm a generous person, but there are things I simply can't overlook. He leaves Shu sweating, unsure if the prince knows more than he's letting on. Calyx's mind races with possibilities, yet he remains outwardly composed. For now, he's in a dilemma, but he knows this is just the beginning. The guard collapses to the ground, wailing that the damned pig Gidris must have revealed everything while he was away. Desperate, he begs for forgiveness, promising never to betray anyone again. But Calyx doesn't respond. It's only when the guard looks up that he realizes the prince has already left. However, the guard shrugs it off, shifting his anger toward Gidris. Determined to take revenge, he bolts toward the dungeon. Meanwhile, Calyx is leaning casually behind a well, smirking to himself. Suddenly, someone approaches from behind, catching his attention. He turns, raising an eyebrow, and asks who the person is. By their attire, he identifies them as a knight from the Order of the Blue Lion. He asks what the knight is doing here. The knight introduces himself as Krot Solemn, explaining that Lord Russell assigned him to accompany the prince. Calyx acknowledges this, immediately activating his system to analyze Krot's stats. To his surprise, Krot is 26 years old, a senior knight level 52, and classified as S rank, a remarkable warrior. Calyx is impressed, wondering why someone of this caliber wasn't part of Heroes of Destiny. The name Krot Solemn doesn't ring any bells, leading Calyx to suspect he must have died early in the game's timeline. With a potential score exceeding 700, Krot could have easily been among the top 100 strongest individuals on the continent. His military ranking combined with his raw power makes him a formidable asset. Calyx muses that Krot might even be connected to the infamous Messenger of Death, a character in the game who slaughtered enemies mercilessly, never revealing his face. But Krot's cheerful demeanor and muscular physique don't align with the thin, sinister figure described in the game. Deciding not to dwell on it further, Calyx acknowledges that having someone like Krot around is beneficial regardless of his past. Krot calls out to the prince, snapping him from his thoughts, and comments that he must have been daydreaming since he'd been muttering Krot's name repeatedly. Before Calyx can reply, Krot informs him that a merchant named Gerard Merces has requested an audience. Hearing this, Calyx's eyes narrow. Gerard Merces, the very name Gidris had mentioned earlier, the man to whom Sheikah owed its crippling debt and the only one with access to the mysterious secret vault. Now things are getting interesting. Calyx strides forward, beckoning Krot to follow. As they walk through the corridors, Calyx observes Krot's slightly clumsy demeanor and concludes it's impossible for him to be the Messenger of Death. A short time later, they arrive at a meeting room. Calyx steps inside, greeted by Gerard, who places a hand on his chest and introduces himself as the head of a small trading company. Calyx responds politely, remarking that he's heard of Gerard's well-respected reputation in business. Talented merchants like you are always welcome, he adds. Gerard bows deeply, thanking the prince for his kind words. Calyx cuts to the chase, asking why a successful merchant like Gerard would seek a meeting with someone like him. I currently hold no official position of authority, Calyx points out. If this is about business, I have no jurisdiction over territorial matters. Gerard chuckles awkwardly, admitting that while it's true Sheikah is currently managed by Count Russell, the territory's future belongs to Calyx. There's no one in Sheikah who opposes your decisions, Prince Calyx, Gerard says confidently. Calyx, maintaining his humility, counters, don't overestimate me. I'm just one of two heirs, nothing more. Krot laughs, pointing out that Calyx is being far too modest. Everyone knows the succession has already been decided, even if it hasn't been formally announced. Gerard nods, admitting that such rumors align with what he's heard. The merchant apologizes if his words were presumptuous. Calyx notes that Gerard is undeniably a capable businessman. After all, someone without access to vital information wouldn't survive in this line of work. However, Gerard finds himself puzzled. The prince before him doesn't match the rumors of a knave and foolish boy. The person he sees is sharp, calculating, and far more mature than expected. Still, Gerard compliments Calyx's striking appearance, admitting that the rumors about his beauty weren't exaggerated. Blushing, Gerard remarks that Calyx is exactly his type. Feeling an ominous intent behind Gerard's words, Calyx abruptly stands, his voice firm. I don't like wasting time, he declares. If you don't get to the point, I'm leaving. Gerard immediately apologizes, realizing he can't afford to lose this meeting. Though he's captivated by the prince's charm, his priority is securing a working relationship with him. Seated once more, Calix watches Gerard carefully and orders him to speak directly. Gerard explains that he wants to support the prince, but his primary reason for being here is the massive debt left by the previous count. Feigning ignorance, Calix claims he's never heard of such a debt. The guy managing finances is in prison for his crimes, he adds nonchalantly. Krot, standing nearby, cringes at Calix's casual nose-picking, finding it utterly distasteful. Unfazed, Gerard smirks, having anticipated this response. He knows that Calix is far from clueless, and this conversation is just getting started. Gerard begins explaining with a sly smile. This all started just 5 years ago, so it's impossible you don't know about it. He beams, thinking this is the moment he's been waiting for. He envisions the despair on this adorable little prince's face, the fear when confronted with the monumental debt. Gerard is eager to watch Calix break down into tears, his face twisting in helplessness. He continues, according to the terms of the 3-year contract, the payment can be demanded at any time. It's unfortunate, but I must inform you, in 2 weeks, 60,000 gold coins must be paid. Krot freezes at the number, visibly shocked, while Calix remains calm, his expression unreadable. Gerard assumes the prince is pretending to stay composed, finding his attempt at stoicism absolutely delightful. He revels in the sight, continuing his internal monologue. Stop flirting with my protagonist, Gerard. Where are the waifus? Calix, however, says nothing. Krot finally speaks up, nervously asking Gerard to consider postponing the payment date. But Gerard quickly dismisses the idea. Silence falls between them. Breaking it, Gerard says with mock pity, it's truly unfortunate, but Shikin's territory has been declining rapidly. We've shown goodwill by waiting over a year for recovery, but nothing changed. Now that Prince Calix is taking charge, he'll need to repay this courtesy. Calix recognizes Gerard's facade of generosity, noting how cleverly he masks his extortion behind politeness. The prince rises, nonchalantly remarking, perhaps you're unaware, but Shikin's annual revenue exceeds 6,000 gold coins. Finding someone willing to lend 60,000 gold won't be an issue. Krot's confusion deepens, unable to believe such a claim. Gerard stands, feigning delight. That's excellent news. It seems there's nothing to worry about then. But inside, Gerard knows how difficult it is to secure connections for such an amount. He announces he'll return soon to collect the payment and leaves, confident this territory will soon fall into his grasp. As he leans in to bow, Gerard's thoughts turn sinister. Soon enough, this pampered noble brat will be groveling at my feet. Maybe I'll sell him at the slave market, but not before enjoying my prize. He departs, thanking Calix and wishing him good fortune. Calix watches him leave, unfazed, while Krot stands there trying to process what just happened. Krot blurts out, 60,000 gold? How can you stay so calm about this? Calix, already planning his next move, knows the secret vault in Gorna holds the answer. The map had already marked ruins and treasures in the region. The challenge now lies in navigating the dangerous continent of Ellen. The highlands of Gorda are particularly perilous, home to intelligent creatures like the Riskath. It's a region people avoid at all costs. Outside the castle, Krot asks Calix what he plans to do next. Calix smirks, knowing it's time to find someone who knows Gorda well, someone like Layla. The scene shifts to a guard stationed outside a holding area. He spots Calix and nervously greets him. The prince compliments the guard's work and asks to see the prisoner. Krot decides to go ahead while Calix handles this. When the door opens, Calix is surprised by how organized the room looks. Clean up a bit, someone remarks. It's none other than Layla, towering confidently as always. Finally, she's back after all the bizarre encounters with Gerard. Calix compliments her appearance, saying she looks great. With a smirk, she arrogantly responds, of course I do, just as you can see. Krot warns her to watch her tone when speaking to the prince, but Layla and Calix merely exchange knowing looks. She brings up the poison he gave her, saying it was from Cetus Marionette, wasn't it? You tricked me. Calix is impressed, admitting she figured it out faster than he expected. Sitting at the table, she asks why he's here. Do you mean me for something? I can already tell you do. She leans in seductively, saying, I don't follow your orders anymore. But if we share a very intimate moment together, I might consider it. Krot immediately tells her to hold her insolent tongue. Calix, unfazed, cuts to the chase. I'm here to give you a chance to survive. Intrigued, Layla asks for more details. Calix explains that the moment she's released, she'll be killed. Layla seems confused, prompting Calix to elaborate. She should already know the Shikin family is at odds with the Hoshirans. That's obvious, Layla replies. You forced the only heir of Hoshiran to seal his mana. Calix nods, stating she was instrumental in that success and should understand the danger she faces. Finally, it clicks for her. The Hoshirans will want me dead because of my testimony, won't they? Exactly. Calix confirms. Restoring Grumbine's mana is impossible, and without it, the Hoshirans have no chance of conquering Shikin. No noble allows someone who derailed their plans to live, especially someone like you. Layla, having worked for nobles for years, had witnessed many of them being killed like dogs, but she never thought it would happen to her. Suddenly, she lunges across the table, grabbing Calix. Krot immediately tenses, ready to intervene. Layla leaps toward the prince, shouting, die. Calix, caught off guard, looks genuinely alarmed. Krot, however, won't let anything happen to his charge. That in the moment he comes stomping with his big foot and slams her against the wall, calling her a filthy assassin and asking how she dares to challenge the young lord like that. Calix thanks her but says there's no need to humiliate the poor girl so much. After all, it was thanks to her that he secured his position as the next lord. He then tells her that normally those who help someone wake up to reality tend to be more hated than those who drive people into despair. And the reason for this is because it's easier that way. Many people believe that living in a lie is better, even just for a moment. But he smiles at her and says that, considering how motivated she seems to survive, she doesn't seem like that type of person. She says she's not and shouts, warning that she wouldn't die under any circumstances. He then smiles and says that if that's the case, he has a way to make her useful. If she helps him with the work he needs done, she will also receive protection in the meantime. And if she has a family, you would take care of them too. However, Layla misunderstands and asks if, by any chance, he's threatening her family. He stands up with that dumbfounded look on his face. He tells her not to misunderstand because if he wanted to, he would have killed her already. Assassins like her are everywhere. The girl knows that's true. To a noble like him, she is nothing more than a tool. He then asks why he wants her and not someone else. There must be some reason he's going through all this trouble to persuade her. Our guy says the first reason is because it would be too much work to find someone else, and the other is because of something she said to him earlier. He then leaves saying that before explaining why, he would give her a minute. If she didn't agree with him within that time, she'd be free to pursue the freedom she so craved. However, Layla knows the truth is that this freedom will cost her life. Here's her only option because leaving that place, she'll be killed by the other family. She didn't want to agree with that cute little runt, but at this moment, she had no choice. And with great determination, she says she understands. Considering the conflict between the two families, she benefits more by helping Shiken. Our boy smiles and says that she's finally starting to think straight. However, she puts her hand on her waist and says she's not going to be a subordinate. She wants to be hired as a regular mercenary instead, and she wouldn't accept a runt like him bossing her around. Suddenly, Krot jumps in and orders her to start respecting the young master. She apologizes and says she's just joking now that they're on the same team. There's no need for him to act like that. Or is he the type of person who liked hitting his allies? Poor Krot just gets even angrier, and the two start to clash again. Suddenly, Calix asks her about something she mentioned the other day, the Hoshiran family training grounds located in the lands of Golda. She remembers saying that to him and asks what this information has to do with anything. But Calix interrupts her and tells Krot that he needs a map of the entire area surrounding those grounds, because the little map he has only he can see in the small window. Krot says there's a giant map in the military council area. He pushes our boy, telling him to go. However, looking back, he sees that our guy is just standing there, grinning at the front. Krot immediately asks if, by any chance, he doesn't know the way. And Calix says he does know, but he prefers having someone protect him from the front. Meanwhile, Layla is standing there with a dumbfounded look, not understanding their bickering. Sometime later in the castle, they finally arrive in the war room. Our boy is all gleaming as he looks around. And Krot says that all the greatest military secrets of the continent of Elen are there. Our boy starts looking for the lands of Golda. Upon finding it, he asks if they know about that place. Krot says it's a well-known area. There's an ongoing territorial dispute between the Hoshiran family and the Baron of the Erebon family. The reason for the conflict is some high-quality copper mines. Our boy asks if Baron Erebon is on their side, and the guy confirms it. He then makes a dumbfounded face, wanting to know how accurate and updated the map is. Layla says it seems a bit outdated, but there haven't been significant changes. At that moment, however, she realizes why she was brought there. Our boy then asks if she can navigate just by looking at the map, and she says of course. She spent her entire childhood playing in that region, but she wants to know why he's so interested in the lands of Golda. He explains that there are some ancient ruins he intends to explore. She looks a bit confused and says there's nothing like that in that place. Calix looks thoughtful and asks if, by chance, adults didn't talk about places where she shouldn't go. She pauses and then says she remembers something like that. At this, Calix asks when the Hoshiran family started training troops there. She says she doesn't understand why he's asking, but since she's of the 6th rank, at least 15 years have passed. He asks when the territorial dispute began. Krot says that also started 15 years ago. At this, Layla suddenly nudges him, asking if he understands where the boy is going with this. He replies that he doesn't, and she feels devastated to have an idiot beside her. Once again, they start bickering, until Calix interrupts them and says that training an army costs a lot of money. They wouldn't have started creating those troops out of nowhere without an important reason. Once again, the dumb girl asks what the boy's point is, and Krot tells her to realize quickly that this means that somehow they managed to obtain a lot of money. Calix says that's exactly it. 15 years ago, the Hoshiran family found a new source of income, and they likely used that money to train their new armies. Once the troops were ready, they were dispatched to numerous territories, exactly as happened with Layla. She says she understands, but what would be the connection between that source of money and the ruins he's looking for? Calix says that silver mines are often found alongside copper mines. Besides that, some copper ores can also contain traces of silver. Krot asks if he's suggesting that the Hoshiran family is secretly mining silver, and that would be an extremely serious crime. Calyx says yes and tells him to think about it. The law of this place stated that any gold or silver found always belonged to the royal family, no matter where it was located. However, it would be foolish to believe that every noble would be that fair. Krot asks what the connection to the ruins is, and our boy says he already knows what kind of ruins they are. Perfect ones to hide this type of secret. Unfortunately, he can't reveal to Krot that he already has some information about this. Layla, who's really growing into a sharp girl, asks what all of this has to do with them. She thought it was impossible for him to attack that place because Shikin's territory didn't have the resources for that. Krot gets frustrated, thinking that, as much as he hates to hear it, this is the truth. And she insists, saying that even if they started a war, as soon as the royal family knew it was pure silver, they'd take everything. Calyx says they wouldn't gain anything by passing this information to someone else. Besides, his territory is on the verge of collapse. Both of them stand there dumbfounded, wanting to know what he's suggesting then. That's when he says that since they obtained the money illegally, even if they stole everything, the Hoshirans wouldn't dare report it to the crown. Later that same day at night, they gathered outside the castle. Russell told our boy that it was madness to take someone as inexperienced as Krot on this mission. He should think more about this plan because acting hastily could be dangerous. Calyx agrees that it would be safer with Russell at his side, but a young talent like Krot also needed to develop. The poor fool blushes at the Lord's confidence in him. Calyx continues, saying that it would be too risky for both of them to leave the territory at a time like this. Russell is surprised and then apologizes. Suddenly, he turns to Krot and tells him he better follow the young master diligently. But the fool just agrees with his tongue hanging out. Even Russell gives him a smack on the head, telling him to take it seriously. Sometime later, he calls everyone together. He explains that the young master's wounds are still fresh. But even so, he planned this expedition for the good of the territory. So all the soldiers there better follow him faithfully. Calyx knows that no soldier wants to follow someone so weak who once tried to take his own life. Gaining the loyalty of those people was also his job. Meanwhile, Layla is just quietly observing from the corner. Sometime later, they approach a well. Krot goes down and our boy follows right behind him. Upon reaching the bottom, he says that by following this tunnel, they would be able to exit the castle. However, it was farther than he had imagined. Calyx just passes by and tells them to hurry up. With that, the team begins walking through the darkness of the cave. Sometime later, Krot looks up and says they finally arrived. Obviously, our boy is exhausted. Krot opens the cover and offers his hand to help our boy up. Suddenly, he finds himself on the outside, or rather inside, a house. Krot explains that this is an old water mill that had been abandoned a long time ago. Already outside, our boy is impressed. He had already prepared several supply horses. Krot calls him Lord and tells him to get on the horse. But Calyx tells him to stop using that kind of title in this place. It would be stupid to call him Lord outside the castle when they're heading toward hostile territory. From now on, he's to call him only Young Master. The army guys put on peasant clothes, but he's still not sure if that's enough to fool anyone. At that, he calls for Krot and asks if he prepared everything he requested. He says yes, but seems a bit hesitant. He pulls out his stinky cloak and asks if he really has to wear something like this. Our boy says that if he wants, he can wear a porter's outfit, but then Calyx will have to play the role of Layla's newly husband. Krot immediately says there's no way he's letting the young lord stand next to an assassin. When he says that, everyone turns to stare at her. Calyx realizes the fool is talking more than he should again. He stomps off angrily while thinking that he didn't say a single lie. But since Calyx asks, he gives her his hand and asks if my lady would go with him. But she just tells him to stop calling her that and to get out of the way. Calyx notices that the two of them don't have the best relationship. Somehow, he needed to calm down his team members. That's because a duo like this would be very useful if they had synergy. But if they kept fighting each other, things would only escalate. Eventually, one would die or leave the team. It's strange how Heroes of Destiny, which was supposed to be just a simple game, felt so real at that moment. He also needed somehow to help Layla prove herself to the rest of the group. Maybe he needed to do something secretly. At that, he tells Krot for them to hurry up and put as much distance between them and the castle before dawn. Krot calls everyone, and the wagons begin moving through the forest. They sleep on the ground, they pass through the forest. They stop at a small shop, they pass through a town. They cross the barrier, they sleep in the forest again. Sometime later, everyone is sitting around a campfire. Krot says that this was the last rural village they would pass through. Calyx then orders everyone to prepare because the real fight would begin tomorrow. Morning comes. He warns everyone that now the real work is about to start. Everyone is already in armor, and they move out. Once again, they're on the wagons, following the path. However, Krot's expression changes. He tells our boy that some of the scouts are already returning. A man reports that in the forest just ahead, there's a group of Sasquatches. Krot asks how many there are. The man says 5, and suddenly someone taps him on the shoulder. Turning around, it's Calyx, asking him to lift him into the tree. The man gives a peculiar smile, grabs him by the waist, and jumps up happily. From up in the tree, Calyx observes the monsters' camp. From afar, he can see the shelter, full of apes carrying skeletons. It's clearly not going to be easy. At that, Calyx asks what the plan is. Krot says they'll probably bombard them with flaming arrows. But our boy looks scared, asking if he's insane for suggesting something like that. Layla is nearby, listening to everything. Krat apologizes, but says that this is the safest way to preserve the subordinates' lives. They couldn't risk trying something different. However, Calyx knows that no one in this world knows more about these creatures than he does. But right now, he has no way to convince the soldiers. Krat grabs him and climbs down from the tree, saying he'll try to think of a more critical plan. While Calyx is thinking of a way to convince not only Krat but the others, Layla is there quietly listening. She sees some of the guys reviewing the plan they'll follow, and she immediately realizes that their plan is garbage. Basically, it's to try and kill the apes, and that's it. Calyx knows that if he makes a suggestion and they don't follow it correctly, things will only get worse. Layla observes him as he watches everyone, trying to find a way to prove himself to these people. While he's standing by the wagon, Layla shows up, saying she wants to discuss something. She warns that the plan will fail, and all the members will die. Even if Krat survives, not everyone is as capable as him. Calyx says he already knows that. She then wants to know why he's silent and not telling anyone anything. He tries to explain that he's not silent. He's just trying to think of a way to convince the subordinates. Suddenly, Layla says she has an idea and he tells her to go ahead. She explains that Sasquatches are very attached to their young. That means if they attack the females and children, the males will definitely come to protect them. The monster's retaliation would only start once they're 100% sure the children are safe. Of course, our boy already knew this and asks what the rest of the plan is. She finds it strange that he doesn't react and says she first needs to know something. The plan was just to pass through quietly and not necessarily kill the creatures. He says yes, since the goal lies elsewhere. She explains that if that's the case, then there is another method. At the moment, the creatures are blocking the path because they think it's safe there. But if they attack the females and children, the front line will be drawn away. Our boy had already thought of this, but there's just one detail missing. He asks her who will do it. Who's going to be the one to attack the creatures alone and draw them all away? He yells, warning that this is basically a suicide mission. But out of nowhere, she says she'll do it, and he looks a bit confused. He explains that since the beginning, when she suggested it, he intended to take the role himself. He then asks if, by any chance, she's planning to use a certain herb. She looks confused and asks how he knew about that. He says it's obvious, because otherwise she wouldn't accept a suicidal mission like this. He then says that lately he's changed a lot out of nowhere. Suddenly, he starts coughing, saying that if it works, it's not a bad plan. She then thumps her chest and tells him not to worry. She spent a lot of time there as a child, so there's no way it'll go wrong. Calyx then asks why she's going so far to help him. She simply replies that if the Shikan family dies, she dies too. Our boy warns that it'll be hard for her to gain recognition from the others and asks if she's okay with that. She seems to agree, and he says okay then. But before she leaves, he wants to help with something. She asks when it is, and he points to the horizon. He asks her what's over there and if she knows the region. She says yes and tells him to ask anything. She knows everything about that place. He then points to a specific spot, and she says that about there, she's certain. It's a camp for some goblins and also a hunting ground for the Sasquatches. Our boy thanks her, saying he can always depend on her. He's only doing this to make her feel more useful and calmer, and she simply says that she's happy to help. They continue chatting, and Krat watches from a distance. The two are having a small conversation, with her giggling and blushing. Our boy starts blushing too, and suddenly she reaches out her hand to his face. Man, this assassin is here to kill once again. Our boy is red. When he closes his eyes and opens them again, he realizes she was just pulling a leaf out of his hair. He turns completely red, not even understanding why he's acting like this himself. It's probably because he spent his entire life as an isolated otaku. Then Krat appears, asking what's going on there. Our boy tells him to get lost and says it's nothing. Then he tells the guy to prepare Layla's equipment. He also says that she'll be on a mission, so nobody should ask questions if she disappears. Krat wants to know about the mission because he doesn't trust her. But Calyx says to trust him. He trusts her, and they're on the same side. The knight doesn't want to accept it, but says that just this once, he'll understand. Layla drops something on the ground and tells them not to worry because she already has her own equipment. Everyone looks at her, a bit embarrassed. Man, this assassin really is dangerous. What's up with her walking around like that? Calyx is practically exploding while Krat asks what this is. She puts on her gauntlets and her boots. Let's admit it, the lower part around the glutes is missing just a bit of armor. She then takes something in her hand and starts smearing it on her face. Apparently, it's that herb meant to distract the Sasquatches. Obviously, it stinks like hell, and Krat pinches his nose shut. Meanwhile, Layla doesn't care at all about her outfit or the people staring at her because of the smell. What matters to her is completing this mission. Her concerns were unnecessary. Calyx then asks the prince if they can start the plan, and he says she should take some soldiers with her. But she's certain they wouldn't listen to her orders, so it's better not to. He responds that if that's the case, then she's free. With that, she gracefully jumps from branch to branch. Krat turns around, saying that they need to move forward as well. The army advances through the forest, and Krat declares that they'll finish this in one strike. Everyone is ready, but Calyx is still feeling insecure about this fight. One of the Sasquatches notices something, and when it turns, Krat is leaping toward it. He manages to land the first cut, but it's too shallow. Calyx wonders why he slashed in a situation where he should have tried to stab. and Krot is quickly covered by the shadow of the Sasquatch, which unleashes a flurry of punches. He's thrown far away, and the fool was grinning, saying that this fight is much more exciting than on the PC. Suddenly, the ape starts beating its chest, and everyone looks confused. A huge flock of birds is heard around, and more of them start approaching. Calyx already realizes that maybe burning down the entire forest wouldn't have been such a bad idea after all. While Krot charges ahead enthusiastically, calling out to the Blue Lion Legion, our boy yells for them to wait and not leave him alone. At that moment, a guy named Albu and another named Thomas step in front, telling him not to stray far. The army begins fighting the apes. Krot prepares, charges his blade with energy, and leaps toward them, declaring that he'll end this now. Before the monster can react, he slashes it, and a blast of energy hits the ape. The entire forest is overtaken by the explosion. As the smoke starts to settle, Krot is already getting exhausted. But apparently, he managed to take down the first Sasquatch. He stands proudly looking back. Meanwhile, our boy wonders why this idiot is enjoying the fight so much. But then he's startled when another Sasquatch is seen pounding one of the knights. The knight's sword falls to the ground, and he runs to retrieve it. But the monster comes to stomp on his back. At the last second, Dear Krot arrives with a kick to the beast's mouth. He tells the knight to grab his sword, and the guy thanks him for saving him. Krot keeps fighting, but realizes that killing them one at a time is going to be very difficult. That's because, seeing the soldier's situation, things were extremely dangerous. He manages to slash another arm, and the giant beast roars. The problem is that he's only one man and is starting to get exhausted. Not to mention, even the older apes were stronger than he expected. He decides to try immobilizing some of them and slides under a leg, slashing at its heel. The beast roars and another one goes down. The soldiers get excited, seeing that they have a chance to win. But Krot knows something is wrong. Looking around the forest, they see 8, but there's still one missing. That's when he hears a sound beside him. There's a giant albino one charging toward the prince. And the worst part is that the monster is running and Calyx has no way to escape. Krot rushes, but Albu steps in front, telling the prince to stay back. From a distance, Krot unleashes another lightning attack, and everyone is momentarily blinded. But as the smoke clears, a hand bursts out of it. It strikes Albu in the chest, sending him flying and leaving a crater in the ground. Calyx is shocked, realizing that should have been him. Thomas steps in front, telling the prince not to move. Meanwhile, the monster keeps advancing and Krot is starting to get exhausted. He leaps for another attack while Thomas stays by the prince's side, until Calyx calls out to him, saying he needs to help deal with his Sasquatch. Otherwise, everyone will die. But Thomas didn't want to leave the prince's side because it was too risky. However, Calyx warns him that no one is coming to save them, so if they have a chance to win, it's now. He grabs the knight's arm and says that if more soldiers die, they'll be at a numerical disadvantage. Thomas knows this, but as a knight, he can't abandon the prince just like that, until Calyx yells, asking how long he plans to defy orders. Hearing that, Thomas realizes he has no choice. In the end, the knight has to follow the Lord's orders, and he says he'll obey. Calyx thanks him and then runs off. He follows the crater until he gets close to Albu. Obviously, the poor guy is in bad shape on the ground, and Calyx is horrified at the sight. With one attack, he had lost his arm, and his armor was completely crushed. He approaches, telling the guide not to lose consciousness because he's going to stop the bleeding. He pours a potion into his mouth, but he knows it's not enough. When he removes the armor, he sees that the guy's stomach is a crater. The Sasquatch's punch and hit directly, leaving him with massive internal bleeding. The problem is that these low-level potions aren't enough. They need a healer as soon as possible. He grabs the guy's sword and tells him to stay awake. He'll come back as fast as possible and make sure he survives. Shortly after, in another part of the forest, he hides behind a tree, observing the Sasquatches. This was the hunting region for goblins that Layla had mentioned. But just glancing at them, he's terrified to see the beasts pounding their chests. The monsters were much stronger and more disgusting than he had imagined. He punches the tree, thinking that he really could die here. He's afraid, even though he wants to trust Layla's plan and is sure she set up the traps. If everything goes right, he won't get hurt, but this isn't the world where he's sitting behind a monitor. Breathing heavily, he remembers Albu lying there. He tells himself it's fine. He won't die. He steels himself, saying that he'll do this, and then steps out from behind the tree. He calls out to the Sasquatches, shouting that today is their day to die. The ape charges at him, but suddenly he pulls a lever and several spears strike from behind. They stab right into the beast's ribs, and it drops to the ground immediately. But as soon as the first one fell, another monster noticed and came running toward him. Calyx barely dodges the attack and manages to pull another lever. This time, a rope swings down, slamming the giant beast into the ground. These were extremely sharp spider vines. Additionally, he had asked Layla to coat the spikes with mermaid venom, an incredibly strong anesthetic. Seeing how weak the ape is now, he believes it worked. He steps closer, grabs the sword, and strikes it right in the middle of the head. The feeling of the blade piercing the skull was so much different than in the game. When he pulls the sword out, he's showered in ketchup. The whole thing was disgusting. He never imagined he'd have to go this far, but there he was taking the creature's lives. He then moves to the other beasts and strikes again, saying that they're detestable. But while he's having his little monologue, a goblin is watching from above. The monster sneaks up on him from behind, and there's no time to react. Blood spurts, and when he turns, someone had jumped in front of him. He falls to the ground as the goblin approaches. When he looks to the side, it had been Albu who had once again saved him. Man, this guy really isn't in good shape. Calyx is consumed by rage and charges at the goblin. He tries to slash, but the little green creature ducks, and he misses the attack. The monster sidesteps and almost clashes him. He barely avoids it, but his shirt is torn. He realizes he only survived because the creature's arms are short. With another swing of his sword, his hand is shaking from how weak his body is. He tries to calm down, at least he has twice the reach of the creature. As long as he doesn't let it get close, he has a chance to win. Suddenly, the goblin lunges at him again. This time, he swings the sword and grazes its ear. He's about to get stabbed when he manages to dodge to the side. He realizes he almost lost an arm. Before he can recover, the monster is already coming at him again. Another slash and another nick on its ear. Again, the goblin goes for his shoulder, but this time he kicks its hand. The moment the creature is disarmed, he screams for it to die and drives the blade into its chest. He's exhausted as the creature's legs go limp. He drops the sword and collapses to his knees in front of the monster. Seeing what he'd done with his own hands, he starts vomiting. This was completely different from the game, and he genuinely thought he was going to die. Suddenly, the system general appears, congratulating him. He had defeated a monster much stronger than him and would receive additional rewards. Additionally, he also defeated an F-class monster. With that, his level rises from 8 to 11. Suddenly, someone calls out to him, and when he looks to the side, it's Krot asking if he's okay. But he quickly notices the dead Sasquatches and the impaled goblin. Krot circles around him, wanting to know if he really wasn't hurt. That's when Calyx asks how the rest of the group is doing. Krot replies that after they killed 2 Sasquatches, the rest fled out of luck. But Calyx knows it wasn't luck, it was Layla's plan. That's when he remembers something and asks where the soldier who was with him is. Krot asks if he means Albu, and our boy says yes. He then points to the side and says he's standing right there. Calyx knew it was impossible for no one to die on the mission, but seeing Albu's body, he apologizes. He blames himself, saying he should have been more careful. Krot stands there observing. Then he says it wasn't Calyx's fault. Besides, Albu had died honorably on the battlefield. But Calyx tells him to stop being ridiculous. Death was just death. There was nothing honorable about it. Krot knows this is the first time the boy has lost his subordinate and understands how he feels. But soon after, more bodies are brought before him. Calyx freezes and asks what happened in the end. Krot says that 3 died and 1 was injured, which was a good outcome given the circumstances. But Calyx can only think that all of this is his fault. He should have forced the knowledge he has about this world without fear of being exposed. Besides, he only survived because of Layla's traps and because Albu stepped in to defend him. He clenches his fists and begins shouting while all the soldiers watch him. He then asks what is done with bodies on the battlefield. Krot explains that if the body isn't in too bad a condition, they can take it back. Calyx simply says to do it, no matter what state they're in. As Krot turns to give the order, he notices everyone crying. The soldiers were moved because, in this world, it wasn't common for a noble to care about their servants. Seeing how he acted, they swore they would protect his life at any cost. Krot noticed everyone's expressions had changed. At least the boy had won a bit of their hearts. Sometime later, Krot approaches our boy. He says that they're ready to leave and are just waiting for the signal. Calyx notices that they're looking at him differently. Seeing their determination, he knew this wasn't the time to feel guilty. He needed to give everyone hope for the future. He then praised everyone's performance in the battle against the Sasquatches. Now they would head to their destination as quickly as possible. However, they wouldn't neglect or abandon anyone who was injured. The men shout that they understand, and then we see what happened an hour ago. Layla was approaching when a Sasquatch lunged at her. Strong as always, she dodges it but hadn't expected them to notice her so quickly. She throws a dagger attached to a rope and leaps to the other side, dodging the Sasquatch's attack and climbing up onto a branch. With that, she blocks the path and jumps back down to the ground. When she turns around and the beast comes at her, it suddenly smashes face first into a trap. With it immobilized, all she had to do was finish it off. But the monster keeps moving and even grabs a tree, pulling it out of the ground. She hadn't expected that. The giant comes in for a crushing hug, but she easily dodges it. Sliding to the side, she starts wrapping the rope around its neck. Before the beast realizes it, it's already being strangled. Somehow, she had managed to make it work. She didn't think it would be possible for this ape to break through those monster tendons. Besides, the ropes were too thin for it to grab with its hands. Then she notices that even while strangled, it's still knocking over trees. She's a bit shocked and decides she needs to finish this quickly. According to what Calyx said, all she had to do was inject the venom straight into its bloodstream. Once again, the ape comes in for a smash, but she dodges and slips behind it. She pulls out a needle and drives it right into the monster's nape. She had done everything he told her to, but she wasn't sure it would actually work. Now her only option was to pray that it worked. The ape, however, doesn't seem to be calming down and keeps thrashing until the trees shatter. Then she realizes the venom isn't working as well as expected. Or rather, is working because the ape's eyes roll back and it crashes face first to the ground. She's impressed that it actually worked. As much as she didn't want to admit it, that blonde brat knew more about poisons than she did. But it's very strange because he changed so much overnight. She's been watching him up close for over a year now. yet suddenly he seems like a completely different person. At least she hopes it's for the better. After all, she never thought she'd get the chance to get revenge again. But maybe now it's possible. Back on the wagons, Calyx glances back. Some soldiers who survived are still exhausted and beaten up. He tells Krot that they're going to stop here, and Krot says he understands. As the soldiers sit around the trees, Calyx approaches and offers them some potions. They hesitate because those are very expensive. But our boy just tosses the bottles to them and tells them to drink up already. That's when someone comes up behind him and asks what he's doing. Calyx already knew someone would complain about this. Krot tells him that even a low-rank potion is extremely expensive. These ones, Russell had prepared specifically for him. After all, 10 bottles like these cost half the reserves of their house. Angrily, Calyx asks if he's telling him to let everyone suffer while these potions just sit there. Krot looks uncomfortable and says that's not exactly what he meant. Everyone watches, and our boy tells them not to worry. When the expedition is over, they'll have enough money to buy as many potions as they want. At that moment, both of them are surprised again. The soldiers bow, thanking the Lord for his generosity. The clueless Calyx is at a loss for words. Meanwhile, Krot notices that now those soldiers have truly decided to give their lives for him. Our boy tells him to wipe that dumb smile off his face and get ready to move out. As soon as he gets on the wagon, the system screen pops up, showing that the support percentage had increased to 18%. He smiles and tells them to move forward. The wagons continue advancing through the forest. Sometime later, someone shouts for them to stop. Krot asks what's wrong, and Calyx says they've arrived at the destination. Krot looks confused because he doesn't see any secret vault. Not to mention there's no one guarding the area. What kind of place is this? Calyx asks if Layla has sent a message, and Krot says no. With that, they just decide to set up camp there for now. Until further orders, they would stay put. A while later, inside a tent, Calyx points to a region on the map and says that the Hoshiran family vault is right there. Krot asks if he's not way off, and our boy says no. At that moment, Krot yells in his face, saying that based on the map, it would take at least a week to get there. The soldiers were already getting exhausted after being away from home for so long, and if they told them they had to march for another week, half would probably give up. Thomas also says that staying in one place for too long is dangerous because they'd be found soon. Calyx lazily tells them to listen before they start complaining. He just pointed to the vault's location. He never said they were going there. Krot comes to ask if the objective of the expedition isn't to steal the vault. Calyx walks to a corner of the tent and says they'll access it from there. He starts stomping on the ground, searching for something until he steps on a lever. Suddenly, the ground begins to rise and a stone appears in front of him. The men look completely confused as he starts fiddling with some kind of puzzle. Suddenly, the stone sinks back into the ground, revealing an entrance. As soon as the blonde boy steps forward to follow the path, the men grab him, saying it could be a dangerous trap. Our boy says he highly doubts that. Krot then admits he's confused and wants to know how Calyx has information about this place. Calyx says that what he knows comes from a reliable source. Considering he's been somewhat incompetent so far, he knows it's hard for them to believe him. But soon, they'll see for themselves. Krot looks a bit embarrassed, and Thomas steps in, saying he believes in their leader. A leader who valued even the weakest of his soldiers was someone he could place his trust in. The other soldiers alongside them also say they believe in him. If they follow this path and die anyway, it would be an honor. Krot gets emotional, and our boy tells them to stop trusting him because he's still weak and can't even use mana properly. They were idiots to trust their lives to someone like him. Thomas smiles, and let me tell you, the smiles in this story are dark. I always feel like these guys have some sinister intention. Thomas then says that strength isn't always physical. Our boy tells Krot to stop crying and turns to everyone, saying it's time to go. With that, the army begins descending the stairs. Meanwhile, Calyx looks out from the tent, hoping everything went well with Layla. Back with everyone's favorite assassin, Layla is collecting monkey blood. She wipes her face, saying she has enough. Standing in front of the cave, she says it's time for some fun. She starts striking 2 pieces of wood together to start a fire. In the next scene, she's jumping from branch to branch, and from afar, you can see the fire she caused. With that, all the Sasquatches in the area should be drawn to it. The problem, however, was something else. Some hooded guys whose insignias looked eerily familiar were passing through the area and saw some bodies on the ground. Layla already knew these cockroaches would show up. She puts her hand on her dagger, saying she's going to finish this. She'd show them what happens when you turn your back on someone with the position of an executioner. One of the men on the ground starts writing on a paper, saying they're in an emergency. They have found his Sasquatch's body, and there was no one wounded nearby. That meant someone capable of fighting a creature like that was in the area. And in this entire region, there was only one family capable of something like that. He needed to inform the Viscount immediately. Layla is quietly observing from a distance. She sees how they're sealing the letters and knows they're scouts. At that, she analyzes the direction of the wind. She takes some of the blood in her pocket and smears it on the tree next to her. Once again, another guy is sealing a letter, and she's watching from the tree above. The scene shifts to the Sasquatches arriving at the fire. They all want to enter the cave, but suddenly, one of them stops and sniffs the air. All of them begin roaring and change direction. One of the scouts carrying the letter is leaping from branch to branch. Thinking he needs to deliver the information as quickly as possible, He stops on a branch to check the path ahead and takes a dagger straight to the chest. He looks down, sees the blade, and when he turns to look behind him, he's kicked to the ground. Man, he falls like a piece of trash. Layla approaches the body, grabs the letter, and realizes it's important to inform the prince about this. She immediately starts running. Meanwhile, the Sasquatches are wandering through the forest, following the scent of blood. At the same time, the group continues advancing through the tunnel. Calyx knows that this place was built by a wizard who had retired to conduct experiments, so it wouldn't make sense for that person to set up a bunch of traps in their own house. Krot argues that it's for ensuring the person's safety. However, our boy places his hand on the wall and says there are no traces of digging. The stairs, too, were crafted using magic. To have that kind of power, the person would have to be at least an 8th class archmage, which means if this person really wanted to set traps, everyone here would already be dead. Krot doesn't quite know how to respond. Then, following the path, they reach a passage leading into a massive room. Excited, Krot orders Thomas to protect their boy while the rest search for treasure. Calyx says that if they find any intermediate-level potions, they should give them to the injured soldiers. He walks over to a chair and sits down calmly. At that moment, Thomas asks how Viscount Hoshuran discovered such a ruin. Our boy says maybe it was luck or someone shared the information, but he isn't sure. Thomas then remarks that it's strange they even had a magical crystal ball. Suddenly, Calyx's expression changes and he wonders if this is what he thinks it is. Even though the magical protections had weakened, it wasn't something the Viscount could break easily. He then asks who the Viscount's lord is and Thomas replies that it's Marcus Antonio. Calyx realizes he'll have to prepare for the worst. At that moment, Krot shows up with the intermediate potions Calyx mentioned. Calyx immediately tells him to hand them out to the soldiers and Krot does so. Though he can't help but think it's far too expensive to waste like this. But Calyx knows that, at a time like this, it's more important to have soldiers than to keep potions stored away. They then show him some magical crystals, additional potions, materials, and other items. None of it was useless, but there wasn't anything incredibly valuable either. However, Calyx knows that if the system said, "This is a treasure ruin," there's still something hidden here. Suddenly, he senses something coming from the corner of the room. Out of nowhere, Krot puts his hand in front of him and asks what's wrong. Krot says they've already completed their investigation and there's nothing lurking in the shadows, so he should stop trying to act alone. But Calyx walks forward anyway, saying he doesn't care because Krot wouldn't understand. He starts running his hand along the wall, trying to remember where the secret door was located. That's when he finds a small hole for his thumb and everything begins to shift. Here comes the boy's treasure. Looks like those 10 years of playing games really paid off. Inside, there's a giant crystal ball surrounded by smaller crystal spheres. Additionally, it's like a monitoring room that could oversee their entire approach. Krot, however, points out that there's something very strange about this place. They had investigated all the ruins, yet he doesn't recall seeing a room like this. Calyx explains that this is what's called a false ruin. In the past, it was common to make 2 entrances. One of them was easy to find but contained nothing valuable, so most people would give up. Krot deduces that the false ruin must be the Hoshuran family's secret vault. And Calyx says that since everything is connected, they can reach it from here. He places his hand on the sphere, trying to recall which function needs to be activated. After fiddling with it for a bit, they hear a sound nearby. When Krot runs over, he sees a door opening and Calyx tells him this leads to the false ruin. But he says there's more. Looking further at the spheres, he points out that in the false ruin, there's an entrance. That entrance leads to the silver mines that have been making the Hoshuran family so much money. Krot says that now it's clear how the royal family never noticed this. Calyx warns that since they don't see anyone here, it likely means the area is only used at specific times. And to ensure rumors don't spread, the workers are probably killed soon after. Krot is furious, but Calyx reassures him, saying it's fine. All they need to do is disable the crystal ball the Hoshurans use as a key. It's like modifying security codes and access connections. After taking everything they need, he'll obviously leave a present for those guys. He then tells Krot to take the men and start collecting all the crates because it's time to leave. But Krot looks sad again about leaving the prince's side. For heaven's sake, bring back my wife you already. Calyx says he can handle it alone and Krot reluctantly agrees, saying he'll return soon. With that, he leaves and Calyx celebrates finally having a moment to himself. And when you know it, our boy finds yet another secret passage. Inside, he discovers an item he's very familiar with from the game, though it looks very different in person. It's the bracelet of the Grand Alchemy Priest. The translation here is garbage, isn't it? And I'm translating the garbage translation, so this is peculiar. Its effect is that when you're on the brink of death, it activates a protective barrier that lasts for 2 hours. But if you take another very strong hit while the barrier is active, obviously, it breaks. The item had a cooldown period of 1 week, and after 3 activations, it would stop working. However, it was perfect for him, since at this moment he has no combat abilities. He slips it onto his wrist, thinking that now it's as if he has 3 extra lives. But as he's about to leave, he notices one more detail. Inside the place where he picked up the item, there was something written. He tries to read it but only understands part of it, something about a Hecatoria or something like that. The problem is that the rest of the message is indecipherable to him. He remembers that once in the game, he heard about this name, Hecatoria. In the legends, she's the goddess who taught humans how to use magic. But he's certain this didn't exist in the game. Could this be something that only belongs to this world? As he touches it with his finger, electricity begins to surge, and he feels a tremor. Suddenly, it seems like only his consciousness exists, and he asks where he is and why he can't see anything. Looking down, there's a giant eye surrounded by glowing blue shapes. He wonders if this is the domain of the divines he heard about, the so-called gods that watch over people in this world. Suddenly, he begins to writhe in pain as a voice echoes in his head. It was as if the words were being forced directly into his brain. A red-haired woman's voice says that this is wrong and inhuman. But one of the energy sources replies that there were no humans there. It warns Hecatoria that the matter had already been settled by vote. She should not think of breaking the pact. The woman protests, saying it's violence and she won't agree to it. Another voice says that if she wants so badly to be human, her wish would be granted. Suddenly, she appears kneeling atop the giant eye. Calyx hears a terrifying sound he can't comprehend. While Hecatoria is screaming in the middle of it all, he covers his ears because he can't bear to listen any longer. The voices declare that Hecatoria has now fallen to the rank of a demigod. It would no longer be appropriate to call her by her old name. From now on, she would become an object of hatred, driven into miserable madness by the very insects she adored. They were eager to see the expression on her face at that moment. Suddenly, Calyx finds himself back in the room. I'm confused, he's confused, you're confused. This must be author's intent. Out of nowhere, the system window pops up and Calyx is shocked. He had obtained a fragment of Hecatoria's first authority. It appears to be a skill that deals area of effect damage to all nearby enemies. The damage scales with his level and is impossible to dodge. However, the more enemies there are, the less damage it deals overall. Calyx knows that abilities normally range from rank F to rank S, but there are exceptions when it comes to so-called unique abilities. And beyond that, there are authority abilities which are even more distinct. It's a power that only X-class individuals or those known as demigods can use. In fact, developing an authority is the only way to reach the X-class. Another system window appears, stating that he has absorbed a fragment of authority. This raises the rank of his soul. Calyx is now certain that the one who sent him to this world was the goddess named Hecatoria. He knows that only authority-level abilities can harm a god. Perhaps she's hoping that somehow he'll avenge her. The lunatic starts laughing with his hand over his face, wondering if this is really going to be the final objective of this game. Obviously, he feels like he's being manipulated, but he's going to end this whether he wants to or not. At that moment, Krot returns and asks if he's done. Calyx tells him not to be surprised, and Krot looks confused. In the next scene, everything is chaotic and lively. There was so much treasure in that room that they needed more time to collect it all. Just the chests filled with coins totaled over 30,000. Our boy gets excited. It's much more than he expected. And Krot says that, in addition, there are several crates with silver bars worth about 100,000 gold coins. The only problem is that transporting so much loot with just this expedition wouldn't be easy. Calyx thinks he never imagined the biggest problem would be having too much treasure to carry. But to him, it doesn't matter how much there is, it won't be a problem. Because when he killed the goblin, he aimed the inventory ability. He's feeling all confident, grinning to himself, while Krot wonders about his excitement. Calyx simply tells him to bring the crates closer. He'll handle the rest. Krot asks if everything in front of him is accounted for, and the man confirms it. Calyx then tells him to prepare everyone for the return journey. Krot agrees, though he has no idea what the boy is planning. But Calyx knows that in this world, the concept of players and abilities doesn't exist. It would take too long to explain what an inventory is. So instead of explaining, he'll just make it work. At that moment, Krot says everyone's outside but asks what they're going to do with the crates. Calyx shows the bracelet and says he obtained it there. It has a subspace magic ability. It's an extremely rare artifact with enough room to store all the crates. Krot's eyes go wide and he asks where Calyx got something like that. Our boy simply tells him to keep quiet and keep it a secret. He says that truly understanding something that valuable would be dangerous if others found out. He then says he's heading out and Krot agrees while still stunned. Calyx thanks him as he leaves. Now he needed to focus on the objective. Thinking of the inventory, the system window pops up. He wonders if it's going to be as simple as a game. He touches one of the crates, and immediately it appears in the inventory as silver bars. It looks as easy as he imagined, and he begins loading his inventory. Man, the kid's like Minecraft, stacking everything in piles of 99. With all the treasure collected, it was time to return. He climbs the stairs, and the men greet him, saying that everyone is ready for the journey back. But Calyx is looking around. He wants to know if Layla still hasn't returned. Krot says no and questions whether maybe she betrayed them and fled. That's why he never trusted her from the beginning. Calyx tells him to wake up to reality. It wasn't a coincidence that the Sasquatches fled at that exact moment during the fight. After explaining what happened, everyone looks shocked. Krot says that attacking the Sasquatch's nest alone was a suicide mission. Even though he didn't like the girl, he didn't want her to die like that. Calyx says he would have suggested sending soldiers with her. But since no one trusted her, she had to go alone on that venture. Krot realizes that not only was he wrong, but it was because of her that they survived. Our boy says that if she hasn't returned, it's because something must have happened. Thanks to her, they avoided countless sacrifices. Now it was time to help her. Everyone stands at attention. Krot says he'll follow the Lord's orders. The other knights say that if she risked her life to save everyone, they needed to help her. Meanwhile, the clueless servant is just thinking that everything in this mission has been trouble. At least now, as a knight, he would complete his duty. Calyx orders them to split into a squad to search for her, while the rest will hide in the ruin. He's considering two possibilities for what might have happened to Layla. Either she was pursued by the Sasquatch leader or by the organization she belongs to. At this moment, he still believes it's the Sasquatches since no other pursuers have shown up yet. Besides, he's certain she's careful enough not to be caught in the act. The problem now is figuring out how to find her. Krot asks what they'll do next, and Calyx checks that everyone is ready. The plan for now was to head straight to the Sasquatch base and start avenging those monkeys. Before Krot can protest, Calyx places some herbs in his hands and tells him to burn them. It would produce a kind of oil that everyone should coat their weapons with. He warns Krot not to complain about the plan, and Krot just agrees. Calyx looks up, telling Layla to hold on. Sometime later, they're spying on the Sasquatch's base. They're sure that only females and children are inside. Calyx says they'll kill those inside first, and soon enough, the males will rush into the cave. But the men look uneasy and ask if this is really okay, since he already knows how dangerous the creatures are. Our boy tells them to see for themselves how powerful the poison on their weapons is. With that, they step forward and the Sasquatches hear something. The entire army begins advancing toward them. As the fight begins, Calyx hears others approaching. They run toward the cave, and Calyx says it's now their turn. They follow some footprints, and our boy says he's sure Layla wouldn't be defeated by those creatures. That's why they'll follow the largest footprints. Riding on Thomas's back, they start running. Along the way, Thomas asks if Calyx likes the woman. He gets it. After all, she's a very attractive woman. Calyx tells him to focus on the mission and stop joking around. But Thomas replies that he never imagined she would volunteer for something so dangerous. Calyx responds that it's because she realized they needed her too. At this moment, the Shekin family is the only place that's good for her. Thinking about the girl's appearance, Calyx knows that on Earth, she'd be a celebrity. But Layla doesn't care about that. Maybe it's because she's always lived with the urgency to survive. The first large-scale content of this game is called the Invasion of Jaboru, and the faction living in these mountains played a direct role in that event. Perhaps from the very beginning, Selvio was intentionally planning all of this. Inside the cave, Krot is amazed they won. The men are cheering, saying that, just as the Lord said, it was very easy to kill the apes with the poison. But they remind each other there's no time to rest, and they quickly set off running again. Krot is impressed, saying that when it comes to poison, he truly respects Calyx. At the very least, he hopes Layla is safe. But then they spot someone lying on the ground, blood at their mouth. On their way, Thomas and Calyx notice something. Our boy is shocked to see Layla lying on the ground, surrounded by two wolves. Thomas runs ahead and slashes the first wolf, while Calyx runs to help her. The problem is that her wound is much deeper than he imagined. He quickly uses a mid-tier potion, and thankfully, it seems to be enough. The only problem is that her recovery will be gradual, and she'll need several more. Thomas returns, saying he drove off the wolves. He helps our boy sit Layla up as Calyx gives her more potion. Her skin color starts improving, and they both feel relieved. At that moment, Krot shows up, and our boy says he arrived just in time. Suddenly, the scene jumps forward to a week later at Shekin Castle. Our boy, who looks more like a beautiful girl, is there training. For heaven's sake, right? This kid is too weak. He's at level 18, which isn't that bad. He's only 15 years old, and the average for an adult man is around level 20. Nearby, Russell watches and says that at least the boy's stamina is improving a lot. He could say that Calyx's physical condition wasn't bad at all. Krot comments that he seems completely different from the day they explored the ruins. Maybe he's taking some kind of secret potion. The hard-headed guy is there all confident, looking like something out of Solo Leveling. He says that his journey to level up has only just begun. The servant suggests they start sword training right away, but Russell says that Calyx's body needs to recover first. Suddenly, Calyx announces that he has something to resolve at the magical tower today. Krot didn't know about this, but our boy tells him to get ready because he's coming along for the visit. With that, he begins to leave, but Russell remarks that it seems Calyx now trusts Krot a lot. Krot responds that he doesn't know why, but he's certain the boy has exceptional talent. Besides, he genuinely cares about his subordinates and the people of the kingdom. Russell comments that lately it's been hard to understand the boy's actions and way of thinking. Krot says that while he may be talented, he still needs a master to guide him. But Russell counters that the priority right now is for Calyx to obtain his official title. He needs to complete the coming-of-age ceremony and advance to Class 4 soon. Still, the fear Russell once had about the future of the territory had disappeared. He never imagined someone suitable would appear this early. The scene shifts to the branch of the magical tower in Shekin's territory. Amidst an endless library, someone welcomes them. Our two boys appear, and here comes another dangerous situation. We're all thinking about Layla. Where is that girl who vanished after the rescue? A woman welcomes the beautiful boy and the muscular man, pulling them in and cheerfully telling them to make themselves at home. She seems strangely upbeat for a mage. She then asks if they'd like tea and uses telekinesis to set the cups in front of them. As she touches the teapot, steam begins to rise. Calyx is impressed that an isolated place like this has a Class 5 mage. Her name is Rosen Dreamwalker, 32 years old, though she looks 26. She serves the tea and asks why he looks so surprised. Calyx says he didn't expect to meet someone as incredible as her in such a rural area. Strangely, Crot is already wondering if this woman is Calyx's type. Calyx then says that if she can heat tea in an instant, she's at least a Class 5 mage. He's certain that it's impossible for a woman in her 20s to achieve something like that without immense talent. The cheaty guy knows she's 32 but is just buttering her up, right? She's all flustered. The fool fell for the trap. Crot is about to comment that she's not in her 20s, but our boy squeezes his arm. The trick works, and she's all happy but admits she's already over 30. Our boy is the master of charm and asks if she has any secrets for staying so youthful. While she says all she does is wash her face with water, Crot is just sitting there listening to the two of them. Some time passes. Finally, Rosen asks what brings the two of them to her tower. They were finally getting to the point. Calyx says he's there to buy explosion scrolls. She's impressed, saying he must be a very unique client. She tells him that 30 of those scrolls would cost 600 gold. But because he's such a cute boy, she'll only charge him 500. Our boy is thrilled to see that using his looks can get him a discount. He asks if that won't get her into trouble. Rosen reassures him, saying she has the authority to adjust prices. Calyx then says he actually has one more request. It's a bit hard to say, but he wants to borrow from the reserve fund. That doesn't make her very happy. She asks how much he's thinking of borrowing. When he says 60,000, the woman spits out her tea. Of course, she says there's no way she can lend that much money. But our boy reveals that he'll leave gold coins and silver bars as collateral. And until he pays it back, she can also charge interest. At the mention of interest, Rosen, who clearly has a bit of a loan shark vibe, starts looking excited. Calyx explains that it'll only be a short-term loan, but he really needs it. That's because it would be madness for Gerard to find out he's using the very coins Calyx stole from him. Calyx knows this is the only place he can get 60,000 gold. Rosen lowers her head, apologizes, and says that unfortunately, it's just too much. Calyx didn't expect that. It seems his favorability wasn't high enough, or maybe he was just too hasty. She adds that she's sure the supervisor would reject it. But then she suggests an alternative. Covering her mouth with her hand, she says the people at Central Headquarters don't keep much of an eye on her area. Maybe it's possible to do it, but it would have to remain a secret between the three of them. If he pays it back within 6 months, there won't be any problems. But as soon as the 6 months passed, she would sell all the gold and silver to recover the money. Our boy is thrilled. That was exactly his plan. Mages are greedy because they need resources to conduct their research. And she was definitely thinking he wouldn't have the money to pay it back, so she'd pocket all the interest. He bows deeply and thanks her, saying he'd be very relieved if she could do this. Meanwhile, he's thinking that now he's resolved the debt with Gerard. Speaking of the fool, he's sitting in front of a subordinate demanding the map. He slams it on the table, furious because it seems that one of the patrols near the vault has disappeared. He begins to wonder if he's in any danger. That's when he realizes that if someone had a direct path to the vault, it would take less than a day. The guy is about to explode with rage. Immediately, he orders everyone to prepare to head to the lands of Golda. The problem is that the direct path was very different. Layla's former team runs headfirst into a golem. With Gerard right behind them, they have no choice but to attack. The golem swings its massive hand, and they realize they won't have time to dodge. The fools get sent flying. The weaker guys nearby already know that if they try to advance, they'll die too. They didn't even need to get close, they got flattened on the spot. Another man, his hair turning white with fear, shouts for caution. But he gets crushed too. Man, these guys are getting destroyed. 2 more idiots panic and another golem finishes them off. Gerard stands there, silent, while the trainer of those men wonders why a golem has appeared. A creature like that doesn't form naturally, which means there's at least a Class 5 mage nearby. He turns to Gerard and suggests they retreat. But Gerard shouts at him, demanding to know why he's saying that. No matter what happens, they must press forward. The path had to be cleared within 24 hours because they had tributes to pay to the Marquis. Even if everyone died in that place, they were to keep moving forward. Back at the tower, Rosen casually asks if they've received a little gift. She wonders if it's something romantic, like a lover or an affair. Our boy says no, and she replies that in that case, she'd like to receive a gift from him. Just then, Layla bursts through the door, asking if there's really an old hag trying to seduce her lord. Calyx enters and announces that all the loveish has already been stored in the tower. Meanwhile, Layla is just glaring at Rosen. Our boy thanks her for the good work and hands her something. He then asks both of them to wait outside. As they leave, Layla asks why the prince was talking to that mage. Crot just whistles, saying he has no idea why. Inside, Rosen is all happy and blushing, saying it's wonderful. Our boy gave her a necklace of golden pearls, and she asked if he's really going to give her something like that. He says it's a token of gratitude for the funds she's preparing for them. This was, of course, the artifact the system had shown him. He tells her not to forget to keep all of this a secret. If they tried to do this the proper way, the paperwork would never be approved. But Calyx knows she's angling for the interest she'd earn on the loan for the magical tower. Rosen reassures him, saying she'll keep that in mind and that he can count on her. She then asks why he wants so many explosion scrolls. Was he preparing for a war? Calyx is impressed by her skill in extracting information. Seriously though, it's a normal question. You bought 30 scrolls that blow everything up. He stands up and says he's not planning anything like that. Those scrolls would only be used for mining. She finds it odd that he used something so expensive just to dig holes. She asks if he's found a gold mine. Calyx is tired of how much information this woman is trying to pull from him. He waves goodbye, saying they'll continue the conversation next time. She looks surprised but smiles, saying she's looking forward to it. Outside, he finally has 60,000 gold in his inventory. With that, all the massive debts of the territory could be paid. He's just anxious to see Gerard's reaction when he finds out his treasures were stolen. While he knows he means nothing to Selvio, it's obvious he won't let the man who ordered his assassination get away with it. They would pay for what they did. Even if they had no idea this had already begun, the revenge wasn't over yet. Back at the golem, the men have wrapped chains around it, trying to pull the creature down. They anchored it to the ground, pulling in all directions until they finally expose its core. One of the men stabs it with a knife, yelling for it to die, and strikes the center of its chest. The core flares up, releasing an explosion as the stones fly in every direction. Man, the squad is in rough shape. Everyone is dead on the ground, swords scattered, bodies collapse. One of the men says they managed to kill the golem, but it costs 60% of their squad. Gerard, however, tells him to stop complaining and to just open the gates already. They reach the door of the hideout and a man brings the crystal ball forward. But when he places it on the door, it displays a message. User invalid. An unauthorized access is detected and the security measures begin to activate. A warning sounds, telling them to step away from the area within 180 seconds. The man insists and tries to place the crystal ball once more. But of course, the error is the same and Gerard kicks the door in frustration, unable to understand what's happening. He has no idea why it isn't working. The man next to him warns that it's better for them to back away because they have no clue what these security measures are. With that, they start running while the door remains intact. It enters stage 1 of the interception program. The security measure was to summon numerous creatures that would attack anyone within a defined range. Back in the carriage, our boy asks Layla where she heard that. She replies that she heard it while he was flirting with that mage. Our boy notices she seems a little angry and says he wouldn't do something like that. It was all business. However, he wanted to ask her something. What would happen if he betrayed Selvio? She looks confused and asks why he's even thinking about betraying the Viscount. Our boy says he just wants to know what kind of person Selvio is. The type to let his subordinates' mistakes slide? She explains that no, he's an extremely perfectionist man. A person who would never tolerate failure in any form. Our boy then wants to know what would happen to Gerard if the Viscount found out. Layla says she has no idea, but Gerard is also not someone who would accept being killed so easily. He would probably try to survive at any cost. It's obvious he wouldn't hesitate to betray the Viscount if necessary. Our boy thinks to himself that it's obvious Gerard wouldn't let himself be killed so easily. Meanwhile, Layla is watching him, realizing that the boy is planning something on his own again. Looking at his cyan-colored eyes, she doesn't know what this strange feeling is. And our boy is deep in thought, feeling like he's missing something. Back in the lands of Golda, the men have finally exterminated the monsters. The problem is that the Viscount's forces have also been almost completely wiped out. Gerard orders them to bring reinforcements and to open that door. There was no way to enter normally, so they had to use explosion scrolls. They blow up the entire door, and the entrance is now open. But the man already had a bad feeling about this. Inside, they realize the treasures are not there. Desperate, he orders the men to quickly find the silver. Everyone runs around searching. Of course, they won't find anything. One of them eventually finds a scroll on the ground. He opens it, wondering what it is. It's an explosive. Boom! Everyone's sent to the afterlife. When Gerard gets up, he has no idea what just happened. Most of the men who ran off to look for the treasure are now buried under rubble. At that moment, Gerard already knows. With what just happened, they will be executed by Viscount Selvio. It's time to activate an emergency plan. He approaches one of the men and tells him he's always been grateful for his service. Out of nowhere, another man comes from behind and finishes him off. Gerard tells the man not to blame himself because he did everything right. It's just that the secret couldn't leave that place. With that, another one is dead. The friend of the fallen man says that someone named Cape definitely won't stay quiet about this. They probably sense something abnormal in the region and will soon figure everything out. Gerard replies that it doesn't matter. All they can do now is follow the emergency plan. The scene shifts to Viscount Selvio's villa. Gerard is there and the old man says nothing. He just stands there until finally he says he heard the story. Immediately, Gerard throws himself to the ground, banging his head and begs for forgiveness. Selvio says he doesn't care about apologies since results are the only thing that matters. He wants to know where the silver he had saved for the greater cause has gone. Gerard says it must be the work of some tomb raiders. He explains that somehow they must have dug their way in within a day. The man says that doesn't make sense since the security system would have been activated. Not to mention it would take a long time to dig that deep. Gerard lies, saying that most of the silver coins are still there. There's no way a handful of tomb raiders could have stolen everything in such a short span of time. Besides, they're already keeping an eye on all the merchants in the region to see where the precious metals will end up. Once that happens, they'll ambush them. Silver coins aren't something you can take far away very easily. Eventually, whoever stole them will return to sell them. Salvio says he understands and warns that it's best to capture those people as soon as they return. Gerard assures him there's nothing to worry about. It will be done. Salvio goes to a drawer and says they need to apply pressure until these thieves return every last coin. However, something had to happen. Of course, Gerard had received his punishment. The poor man begs to be spared, but the whip comes down on his back. Salvio curses him as a slay bastard and asks if he's really mocking him. Gerard is just there, thinking that somehow he has to endure this hell. Salvio continues whipping him, shouting that the biggest problem is that he lost half of the shadow forces. Something they had been training for so long became useless because of him. After a great deal of affection on Gerard's back, Salvio pauses for a moment. He warns that his complaints are nothing. But if they jeopardize the greater cause, that's a whole different story. He warns that from now on, Gerard no longer has any authority over the shadow forces, and he can only act after receiving permission from him. Gerard, of course, simply replies that he understands. The man then says that they urgently need tribute money now. He orders Gerard to inform the Shikan territory that they will begin the process of confiscating their assets. Even if they don't have much of value, would be enough to help with the tributes. If it's not possible to take anything from Shikan, then Gerard himself would have to sell what he owns to pay the bills. Gerard just says he understands and tells him not to worry. Meanwhile, he's thinking to himself that there's no way he's losing everything he worked so hard to get. Salvio sits back in his chair and reminds him that he hasn't been forgiven. He'll have to find that silver. And if he doesn't, he already knows what will happen. Sweating profusely, Gerard simply replies that he understands and bows deeply. Outside, Gerard's friend asks if he's okay. He hands him a potion and tells him to recover quickly. Gerard drinks it and the man tosses him a cloak saying they need to return to the base soon. However, Gerard wants to know where this Jacoby is. The man responds that Jacoby drank too much, and after the fight, he hasn't been able to do anything. But recently, they added a desert boy who looks like Prince Calyx. Gerard scoffs, saying he doesn't like desert folks because of their sunburned skin. However, he wants to know how the rest of the preparations are going. The friend replies that everything will be ready in 3 days. The problem is whether they'll be able to escape easily. The man reassures him, saying not to worry. Half of the squad is dead or injured, and the remaining ones are just low-level thugs, so this was the perfect opportunity. Maybe all these events were a blessing in disguise. After all, the more money they had to build a new life, the better it would be to escape. However, Gerard doesn't look convinced. He believes that the boy from the Shikan family has already won the succession battle easily, so it probably won't be that simple. A few days pass. Krot enters the room and calls for the two of them. He announces that Gerard and Mythos have come to visit. It's probably because of the debts. Russell says it's exactly as the prince had predicted. He tells Krot to accompany the prince to meet with the men. Russell wasn't going to get involved in this anymore because he believed the boy was capable of leading the territory. Krot says he understands. Meanwhile, Gerard, ever the lunatic, looks flushed, saying the boy's physique is improving day by day. But our boy simply replies that he doesn't greet unnecessary people, and that Gerard's arrogant attitude was already testing his patience, so it was better to get straight to the point. Gerard says that if Calyx is so eager, he'll be direct too. He opens his arms and announces that the official confiscation would begin. He had determined that the Shikan territory wouldn't be able to pay the 60,000 gold, so they would take everything there as collateral for that amount. Our boy asks what Gerard will do if he refuses. With a finger to his nose, Gerard replies that he'll call for a senior official to ensure Calyx doesn't escape. And obviously, a forced audit of the territory would happen. Krot insults Gerard, but the man replies that this isn't a time for violence. It's just that he needs to be a bit more assertive in recovering his funds, as much as he also thinks this is the worst-case scenario. Our boy says that if Gerard really thinks it's that bad, he should delay the payment even further. Gerard replies that if Calyx were a little more sincere, maybe that could happen. At that moment, Krot realizes the man is subtly asking for a bribe, but Calyx feels that paying off the debt now would just leave him at a loss. However, to avoid complicating things for now, he decides to stick to the usual script. He announces that he has managed to gather most of the money, so there's no need for him to be sincere at all. Gerard suddenly stands up and demands to know how he gathered 60,000. Our boy asks why he looks so angry and surprised. Was this a good thing? He places the official notes on the table and says all the values are legitimate. Gerard knows that those notes are indeed government issued. But how the hell did this kid manage to gather 60,000 in such a short time? That's when Gerard has the idea to take this money and flee with it. It would be much better than escaping with gold and silver, so maybe this was the perfect chance to go to another country. Calyx places a silver bar on the table and asks if Gerard wants to verify it. He explains that he has 32 pieces of these in 420 crates. At that moment, Gerard recognizes those as the very silver bars he had hidden from the Viscount. Now everything starts to make sense. The Viscount thought Gerard was only hoarding a few silver coins and some copper, but Gerard had been secretly using the hidden mines to amass far more resources and stash them away. Now that Calyx knows about it, it's hard for Gerard to go against him because he'd be reported to the Viscount. If Selvio discovered this, Gerard would obviously be executed. Calyx then tells Gerard they don't need to pretend anymore about what's happening here, and he asks Gerard what he thinks his fate will be. Since Calyx is a kind boy, he'll give him two choices. Either he confesses that he was stealing for Selvio and faces punishment, or he betrays the Viscount and flees this place. Gerard is just seething with frustration. While the boy knows that Gerard is completely cornered, to give him a sliver of hope and help the man out, he decides to take action. Calyx tells Gerard that he will help him survive if he chooses to flee. This was a very rare opportunity, so he wants to hear Gerard's answer. Krat seems a bit confused about the prince's plan. Gerard replies that just helping him escape the territory isn't enough. Our boy says he can provide solid support to ensure no one touches him. Gerard asks if the prince is trying to make him serve him. Calyx responds that Gerard is already hated by the most powerful person in this region, so obviously that wouldn't be a good deal. Gerard then says that if he had someone even more powerful than that man, surely the prince would be the one conceding. Calyx replies that Gerard has finally understood and places a sheet of paper in front of him. He says that once Gerard signs it, he'll reveal the plan. The paper states that the Shikan territory has already paid off all its debts to Myrta's companies. The lunatic starts laughing, saying that Calyx really is terrifying. It seems the boy has been deceiving the entire world this whole time. Gerard says he'll sign because he has no other option. After all, he doesn't want to become an enemy of the blonde boy. Our boy thanks him, while Gerard thinks to himself that eventually, he'll manage to get a like on this video that helps Mamoru make more juicy content for his viewers, activate the cheeky little bell, and I'm out.